My son told me he wanted to check the brake lines on my 1987 Buick Grand National because he was worried about my safety. He crawled out from under the chassis with a smudge of grease on his cheek and a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. He told me I was good to go. He told me he loved me. I waited exactly 3 minutes until his taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I jacked up the car, slid underneath on my creeper, and found a black magnetic box the size of a deck of cards taped to the frame. I didn't call him. I didn't scream. I peeled the device off, put it in a padded envelope, and mailed it to a long-haul trucker friend heading for the Canadian border. 12 hours later, I got a call from the Montreal Police Department telling me to turn myself in for a triple homicide. That was the moment I realized my son didn't just want to track me. He wanted to frame me. My name is Isaiah Jefferson, but everyone who knows the difference between a socket wrench and a tire iron calls me Ike. I am 71 years old. I spent 20 years fixing tanks for the Army and another 20 fixing sedans for the people of Atlanta. I know machines. Machines are honest. If a car doesn't start, it is because something is broken, not because it is lying to you. People, on the other hand, are a different story, especially the people you share DNA with. Before I tell you how I turned a frame job into a trap for the people who betrayed me, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had a gut feeling that saved your life. It started on a Tuesday afternoon. The Georgia heat was rising off the asphalt of my driveway like steam from a kettle. I was in the garage organizing my tool chest when a shiny silver BMW pulled up. It was my son, Darius. I hadn't seen Darius in 6 months. Not since he and his wife, Veronica, tried to convince me to sell my house and move into a condo so they could manage my assets. I told them to get off my porch that day. But here he was, walking up the driveway with a bag of takeout from my favorite barbecue joint and a look of concern plastered on his face. He looked thin, nervous. His eyes were darting around the yard like he was expecting an ambush. "Hey, Pop," he said, holding up the bag. "I was in the neighborhood. Thought I would bring you some ribs." Peace offering. I wiped my hands on a rag and looked at him. Darius was 35, but he still had the soft hands of a man who had never done a day of hard labor. He was wearing a polo shirt that cost more than my first car. I took the food. We sat on the porch. He talked about the weather. He talked about the Braves game. He talked about everything except why he was really there. I let him talk. In my line of work, you listen to the engine to find the knock. And Darius was knocking loud. Eventually he got to the point, or the lie he wanted me to believe was the point. "Pop, I have been thinking," he said, wiping sauce from his lip. "That Buick of yours. You drive it pretty hard. Veronica and I, we worry. The brake lines on those old G-bodies are notorious for rusting out. My Buick is pristine. I keep that car better than I keep my own health." But I nodded. "Is that right?" I said. "Yeah," he continued, too eager. "I took a mechanics course online, just for fun. Let me scoot under there and take a look, just for peace of mind. Please, Pop, for me." I knew he hadn't taken a mechanics course. Darius couldn't change a wiper blade. But I saw the sweat on his forehead. I saw the way his leg was bouncing. He needed to get under that car. "Go ahead," I said. "It is in the garage." I watched him. He grabbed a flashlight and disappeared under the rear axle. He was down there for a long time. I heard the sound of tape tearing. I heard metal clinking. When he came out, he was breathing hard. "Everything looks good, Pop," he said, dusting off his knees. "Just a loose clamp. I tightened it for you. You are safe now." He didn't stay long after that. He said he had a meeting. He hugged me, and for a second, I felt him trembling. As soon as he was gone, I closed the garage door. I locked it. I turned on the high-powered work lights. I didn't need to be a detective to know something was wrong. I grabbed my creeper and slid under the back of the Buick. I went exactly to the spot where he had been working. It wasn't a loose clamp. Tucked up high inside the wheel well, wrapped in black electrical tape that was already peeling because he had done a sloppy job, was a black plastic box. It was a hardwired GPS tracker, professional grade, the kind private investigators use. My heart sank into my stomach. It felt like a stone, my own son. He wasn't fixing my car. He was tagging me like a wild animal. I pulled the device free. I sat on the concrete floor of my garage, turning it over in my hands. Why? Why did he need to know where I was? I was a retired man. I went to the grocery store and the hardware store. My life was boring, unless he needed me to be somewhere specific, or unless he needed to prove I was somewhere specific. I thought about the way he looked. Desperate, scared. This wasn't just curiosity. This was a plan. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a cup of black coffee. My hands were steady. They always were when things went sideways. I looked at the tracker. It had a serial number. I went to my computer and ran a little program a buddy from the Signal Corps had given me years ago. It wasn't strictly legal, but neither was sticking a tracker on an old man's car. I pinged the device. It was active. It was broadcasting my location in real time to an app. Whoever was holding the phone on the other end, Darius or Veronica, was watching a blue dot sitting in my garage. I could have smashed it, I could have called him and screamed, but that would only tell them I knew. And if they were desperate enough to do this, they would just try something else. Something worse. I needed to know the game before I played my hand. I looked at the clock. It was 6 p.m. My friend, Big Mike, was due to pass through Atlanta on his way north in about an hour. Big Mike drove an 18-wheeler. He was doing a long-haul run, Atlanta to Montreal. A smile touched my lips. It wasn't a nice smile. I grabbed a padded envelope. I wrapped the tracker in bubble wrap. I didn't turn it off. I wanted the signal to be strong. I drove my pickup truck, not the Buick, to the truck stop off I-85. Big Mike was eating a slice of pie when I walked in. He was a mountain of a man with a beard like a bird's nest. "Ike," he boomed. "What brings you out here?" "I have a favor to ask, Mike," I said, sliding the envelope across the table. "I need you to take this for a ride. Don't open it. Just let it ride in the cab with you." "To where?" Mike asked. "To the end of the line," I said. "Canada." Mike looked at me. He saw the look in my eye. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded and tucked the envelope into his jacket pocket. "Consider it done, Ike." I went home. I put the Buick back in the garage and covered it with a tarp. I went into the house and turned off all the lights. I sat in my armchair in the dark, watching the app on my computer screen. The blue dot began to move. It merged onto the highway. It started heading north, fast. At 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Darius. "Hey, Pop. Just checking in. You got any plans for tomorrow? Maybe taking the Buick out for a spin to stretch its legs." I looked at the screen. He was fishing. He saw the dot moving. He thought I was on the road. I typed back slowly. "Thinking about it, son. Might take a long drive, clear my head. Maybe go visit your aunt in Carolina, or maybe further." I hit send. The blue dot on the screen was passing through South Carolina now, doing 70 miles an hour. I took a sip of my cold coffee. "Go ahead, son. Watch the dot. Follow the breadcrumbs. You think you are tracking a senile old man, but you are tracking a ghost, and by the time you realize the car is empty, it is going to be too late to hit the brakes." I didn't sleep that night. I sat there as the sun came up, watching my digital self cross state lines, while the real me sat in the shadows, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I knew it was coming. You don't put a tracker on a car unless you are expecting a collision. And I was ready to be the wall they crashed into. 12 hours is a long time to sit in the dark. It is long enough to drink a pot of coffee, long enough to watch the moon traverse the entire sky window, and long enough to watch a tiny blue dot on a computer screen travel 900 miles north. I watched that dot like it was my own heartbeat. It moved steadily up Interstate 85, merged onto 77, cut through the mountains of Virginia, and disappeared into the vast, flat expanse of the north. Big Mike was making good time. He was a machine. He didn't stop for food, didn't stop for sleep. He just drove, carrying a piece of black plastic that my son thought was attached to my car. I sat in my kitchen in Atlanta, the silence of the house heavy around me. My Buick Grand National was safe in the garage, covered by a tarp, invisible to the world. But to whoever was watching that app, I was currently crossing the Champlain Bridge into Montreal. The clock on the microwave blinked 6:15 a.m. The sun was just starting to bleed through the blinds, painting stripes of orange on the linoleum floor. My eyes were burning, gritty with fatigue, but my mind was razor sharp. I was waiting for the phone to ring. I expected it to be Darius. I expected a text asking how the drive was, or maybe a feigned panic about my location to cover his tracks. But when the phone finally rang at 6:23 a.m., the name on the caller ID wasn't Darius. It wasn't Veronica. It was a number I didn't recognize. The area code was 514. I stared at it. 514. That wasn't Georgia. That wasn't the Carolinas. That was Quebec. That was Montreal. My heart hammered against my ribs. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I picked up the receiver, my hand steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "Hello," I said, my voice rough from a night of silence. There was a pause on the other end. No background noise, no traffic, just a hiss of static, like someone was breathing into a voice changer. "Mr. Jefferson," a voice said. It was digital, metallic, stripped of any human cadence. "You are a hard man to predict." "Who is this?" I asked, tightening my grip on the phone. "You are off route," the voice said. "The drop point was the port, old man. Why are you heading toward the residential district?" I didn't answer. My mind was racing, connecting dots faster than a circuit board. They weren't tracking me to see if I was safe. They were tracking a delivery. "Turn around," the voice commanded. "You have 20 minutes to get the vehicle to the rendezvous point at the old port. If you miss the window, we assume you have gone rogue. And Mr. Jefferson, you do not want us to assume that." "I am not in Montreal," I said, testing them. "Don't play games," the voice hissed, losing some of its robotic cool. "We see you. We see the tracker. We know exactly where the car is. Now listen closely. Under the rear chassis, next to the tracker, there is a secondary device. It is wired into your fuel tank. My blood turned to ice. If you stop moving for more than 10 minutes or if you try to remove the package from the door panels, we trigger it remotely. Do you understand? You are sitting on a bomb, old man. Now deliver the car or we turn you into a firework." The line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like an angry hornet. I slowly lowered the phone. A bomb. I ran to the garage. I didn't care about the noise. I tore the tarp off the Buick. I threw myself onto the floor and slid under the rear of the car, right where I had found the tracker. I shined my flashlight up into the darkness of the undercarriage. There it was. I had missed it the first time because I was so focused on the GPS box. But there, tucked high up near the fuel line, was a second lump of gray putty, wired with a small red receiver. It was small, maybe half a pound of C4, but positioned right next to the gas tank, it was enough to turn my classic car and anyone inside it into shrapnel. I scrambled out from under the car, gasping for air. I sat on the concrete, my back against the tire, shaking. They hadn't just tracked me. They had rigged me. I closed my eyes and the picture became terrifyingly clear. Darius didn't just borrow money. He didn't just make a bad investment. He had sold me. He and Veronica had sold me to a cartel. They needed a mule to move something across the border, something hidden in the door panels, the voice had said. Who better than a 71-year-old veteran with a pristine driving record and a classic car? I was the perfect cover. And the bomb? That was the insurance policy. If I got pulled over, or if I decided to check the trunk, or if I just decided to stop for a nap, they could erase the evidence with the push of a button. My son sent me to die. He came over yesterday, ate my ribs, looked me in the eye, and sent me on a suicide mission. If I had listened to him, if I had taken that drive to clear my head, I would be in Canada right now, sitting on a bomb, delivering drugs or worse to a gang of killers. And if I died? Well, Veronica had just upped my life insurance policy 6 months ago. Double indemnity for accidental death. I felt a roar building in my chest, a primal sound of grief and rage that wanted to tear the house down. But I swallowed it. I forced it down into the pit of my stomach where it could burn as fuel. I wasn't a father anymore. I was a soldier behind enemy lines, and the enemy was sleeping in my guest room just last Thanksgiving. Suddenly, a car screeched into my driveway. I froze. I heard the slam of car doors. 2 of them. Running footsteps on the concrete walkway. I scrambled up and killed the lights in the garage. I moved silently to the side door that connected to the kitchen, cracking it open just a sliver. Through the front window, I saw them. It was the silver BMW, Darius and Veronica. They looked like they had seen a ghost. Darius was wearing the same clothes as yesterday, disheveled and stained with sweat. Veronica was pale, her perfectly make-uped face twisted in pure terror. They pounded on the front door. "Dad!" Darius screamed, his voice cracking. "Dad, answer me!" They weren't knocking like visitors. They were knocking like people running from a fire. "He is not here, you idiot!" Veronica yelled at him, grabbing his arm. "Look at the app! The dot is in Canada! It is in the river!" They were staring at a phone screen, panic radiating off them in waves. "Then why isn't he answering the car phone?" Darius shouted, looking at the house, then at the empty driveway where my truck usually sat. I had parked it round back. He must have taken the Buick. He actually went. "Oh my God, Ronnie, he actually went." Veronica slapped him. A sharp, vicious sound. "Shut up. Do you know what happens if he doesn't make the drop? The Colombians called me 5 minutes ago. They said the driver is off course. They are going to blow the car, Darius. They are going to blow him up." Darius slumped against the doorframe, sliding down until he hit the porch floor. He put his head in his hands and sobbed. "I killed him," he moaned. "I killed my own father. Stop crying," Veronica hissed, looking around the neighborhood with wild eyes. "We have to think. If the car explodes in Canada, maybe it is better. No body, no evidence. We just have to stick to the story. He went on a trip. He was confused. It was an accident." I stood in the dark kitchen, gripping the handle of a wrench I had unconsciously picked up. I watched them. I watched my son crumble under the weight of his sin, and I watched his wife calculate the profit margins of my death. They thought I was 1,000 miles away, drifting in a cold river. They thought they were alone with their crime. But I was 5 feet away. I was the ghost in the machine. And as I watched Veronica pull Darius up and drag him toward the window to peek inside, I knew one thing for certain. The man who drove that Buick was dead. The father who loved them blindly was dead. The man standing in the dark was someone else entirely. And he was about to teach them a lesson about what happens when you try to bury a mechanic who still has his tools. I stepped back into the shadows of the hallway, letting them peer into the empty, silent house. Let them sweat. Let them think they got away with it. Because when I finally turned the lights back on, there would be nowhere left for them to hide. I didn't open the door. I didn't yell. I didn't reach for the shotgun I keep mounted above the pantry frame, even though every instinct in my body was screaming at me to defend my perimeter. I am 71 years old, but inside, I am still the 20-year-old specialist who learned that you never engage the enemy until you know exactly how much ammo they have. And right now, I was fighting blind. So I did what a ghost does. I vanished. I slipped out the back door, moving with a silence that surprised even me. My arthritic knees popped, but I ignored the pain. I crossed the small patch of grass that separated the main house from my sanctuary, the tool shed. It wasn't just a place for lawnmowers and rakes, it was my command center. Years ago, after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood, I had wired the house with hidden cameras. Small pinhole lenses tucked into smoke detectors and bookshelves. I never told Darius. I certainly never told Veronica. They thought I was just an old man who spent his time tinkering with carburetors, not someone who understood surveillance. I locked the shed door behind me and sat down in front of the dusty monitors. The air smelled of gasoline and old sawdust. I flipped the switch, and the screens flickered to life in grainy black and white. There they were. Inside my living room, the people who were supposed to be my legacy. Darius was pacing back and forth, wringing his hands. He looked like a man whose soul was trying to crawl out of his skin. Veronica was sitting on my recliner, the one my late wife used to knit in. She wasn't knitting. She was scrolling frantically through her phone, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated venom. I turned up the volume on the receiver. The audio was tinny, but I heard every word, and every word was a nail in the coffin of the father I used to be. "He is not answering," Darius stammered, his voice cracking. "The signal is still in Canada. It is stationary, Ronnie. It is in the water." He drove into the river. Oh God, Pop drove into the river. "Good," Veronica spat. I flinched. The word hung in the air of the shed like a gunshot. "Good." "What is wrong with you?" Darius yelled, stopping his pacing. "That is my father. Shut up and think, you idiot," Veronica hissed, standing up. She walked over to him. On the screen, she looked like a predator cornering a wounded rabbit. "If he is in the river, the car is in the river. That means the shipment is gone. Do you know who we are dealing with? The cartel doesn't care about your daddy issues. They care about their product." She grabbed him by the collar of his expensive polo shirt. "We had a plan, Darius. He was supposed to drive to Florida. The buyers were in Miami. Why the hell did he go to Montreal? Who goes to Canada in October?" I leaned closer to the monitor, my heart hammering against my ribs. Florida, Miami. The puzzle pieces slammed together. The concern about my brakes. The suggestion that I take a long drive to clear my head. They weren't trying to help me relax. They were trying to steer me. They wanted me to be a mule on the Interstate 95 corridor, running straight south into the arms of a drug deal, while they sat safe in Atlanta waiting for the payoff. But the tracker went north. I had unknowingly thrown a wrench into the gears of a machine that was designed to grind me into dust. Darius pulled away from her, tears streaming down his face. "I can't do this anymore, Ronnie. I am going to call the police. Maybe they can recover the body. Maybe we can explain." Veronica slapped him. It was a sharp, vicious sound that echoed through the speakers. Darius stumbled back, holding his cheek, looking at his wife with a mixture of fear and awe. "You will not call the police," she growled, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "You will listen to me. We stick to the story. Your father was senile. He took the car and wandered off. We don't know where he went. We collect the insurance money, we pay off the debt, and we pray the cartel accepts the cash instead of our heads. The debt." So that was it. They weren't just greedy, they were underwater. I sat back in my chair, the darkness of the shed wrapping around me. I felt cold. Colder than I had ever felt in the winters of Germany during my service. My son hadn't just made a mistake. He had traded my life for a ledger entry. He had put a price tag on the man who taught him to walk, who paid for his college, who held him when he cried over his first heartbreak. And the price was the cost of a cocaine shipment. A shipment. The voice on the phone had said the package in the door panels. Veronica had said the product. I looked at the monitor. They were still arguing. Veronica was pouring herself a drink from my liquor cabinet. They were distracted. They thought the threat was in Canada. They didn't know the threat was sitting 50 feet away in the backyard. I needed to know exactly what I was carrying. I needed to know the weight of my own death warrant. I moved. I left the shed, crouching low in the tall grass. The sun had fully risen now, but the shadows were still long on the west side of the house. I crept toward the garage. The garage was detached, connected to the house only by a covered walkway. I knew the blind spots. I knew where the floorboards creaked. I was a burglar in my own home. I keyed the code into the side keypad. The door slid up silently. I kept the tracks greased every month. I slipped inside and hit the button to close it immediately. I was in darkness again, save for the thin sliver of light coming from under the door. My Buick Grand National sat there under the tarp, my pride and joy. A 1987 beast of a car that I had restored bolt by bolt. It looked innocent. It looked like a machine made of steel and rubber, but now I knew it was a Trojan horse. I pulled the tarp off. The black paint gleamed in the dim light. I opened the driver's side door. The interior smelled of old leather and vanilla air freshener. It smelled like safety. It smelled like Sunday drives to church. I grabbed my trim removal tool from the workbench. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it was burning my fingertips. I knelt down by the driver's side door. The voice said the door panels. I wedged the tool between the plastic panel and the metal frame. Pop. The first clip gave way. Pop. Pop. I worked my way around the edge, the sound of the plastic snaps sounding like firecrackers in the silence of the garage. I pulled the panel back. I expected to see the window regulator. I expected to see the soundproofing insulation. I didn't see that. Instead, the entire cavity of the door was packed tight. It was filled with rectangular bricks wrapped in layers of heavy gray duct tape. They were jammed in there with precision, utilizing every inch of empty space. I reached in and pulled one out. It was heavy, dense. I took a utility knife from my pocket and sliced the tape. Beneath the tape was vacuum-sealed plastic. And beneath the plastic, white powder, pure, uncut, white death. I looked at the brick in my hand. It weighed about 1 kilo. I looked back at the door. There were 4 more bricks just on this side, 5 kilos. And if the passenger door was the same, and the rear panels, we were talking about 20 kilos, maybe more. This wasn't a small time deal. This was millions of dollars. This was federal prison for life. This was a cartel execution if a single gram went missing. I stood up, holding the brick. I looked at the door leading into the house. Darius and Veronica were just on the other side of that wall, drinking my whiskey, planning my funeral. They had been driving this car for weeks, they said, testing it, checking the brakes. They hadn't been checking the brakes. They had been turning my classic car into a rolling felony. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. But then, I looked at the brick of cocaine again. Veronica said the cartel would kill them if they didn't see the goods. Well, I had the goods. And suddenly, the fear evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, mechanical clarity. I was a mechanic. I fixed things. And right now, my life was broken. My family was broken. I knew how to fix this, but it wasn't going to involve a wrench. It was going to involve burning everything down to the ground. I grabbed a roll of duct tape from the bench. I taped the brick back up. I shoved it back into the door panel and slammed the plastic cover back into place. I hit it with the heel of my hand. Snap. It looked perfect. Invisible. I wasn't going to call the police. Not yet. The police would arrest Darius. They would arrest me. It would be a mess. Veronica would spin a story. She would hire lawyers. She would pin it all on the senile old veteran. No. I needed something stronger than the law. I needed leverage. I looked at the Buick. They thought the car was in Canada. They thought the drugs were at the bottom of a river. I was going to let them believe that. But first, I was going to move the car. I was going to make the ghost disappear for real. I opened the garage door. I put the car in neutral and pushed it out into the driveway, silent as a whisper. I didn't start the engine until I was at the bottom of the hill. As the V6 engine roared to life, a deep, guttural rumble that shook the pavement, I looked back at the house one last time. I saw the curtains move in the living room. Run, Veronica. Run, Darius. Because the old man isn't in the river. He is coming for you, and he is bringing hell with him. I watched them from the window of the garage, my hand resting on the cold steel of the Buick. They were standing in my living room, arguing, pointing fingers, their voices muffled by the brick walls, but their panic loud and clear. Darius was falling apart, a man who had sold his soul and was now realizing the devil didn't offer refunds. Veronica was calculating, her eyes hard, already spinning the next lie. They thought I was in Canada. They thought I was driving toward a cold river or a cartel executioner. Good. Let them think that. In the army we had a saying, if the enemy is looking left, you go right, and if they think you are dead, you become a ghost. I wasn't going to call the police, not yet. If I called them now, Darius would go to jail, yes. But Veronica, she was smart, she was slippery, she would claim she knew nothing, she would claim Darius acted alone, that she was just a worried wife. She would walk away with a slap on the wrist while my son rotted in a cell. No, I needed more than an arrest. I needed a confession. I needed to peel back the layers of her greed until there was nothing left but the ugly truth. I looked at the car. 5 kilos of cocaine in the door panels. A bomb wired to the gas tank, which I had carefully disconnected 5 minutes ago, my hands steady as a surgeon's. This car was evidence, but right now, it was leverage. I opened the garage door again, just enough to squeeze the car out. I didn't turn on the headlights. I didn't turn on the radio. I rolled down the driveway in neutral, the tires crunching softly on the gravel. At the bottom of the hill, under the cover of the neighbor's overgrown oak tree, I turned the key. The engine purred to life. I didn't drive fast. I drove with purpose. I headed south, away from the highway, toward the industrial district where the streetlights were broken and the buildings were hollow shells. I pulled into a salvage yard owned by an old friend named Silas. Silas owed me a favor from back in '98 when I fixed his generator during the ice storm. He didn't ask questions. He just opened the gate and let me park the Buick in the back, hidden behind a mountain of rusted washing machines and dead tractors. I covered the car with a tarp. "Keep her safe, Silas," I said, "and don't look inside." Silas nodded, spitting tobacco juice onto the dirt. "You were never here, Ike." I walked home. It was 3 miles. My knees ached with every step, but the pain kept me focused. It reminded me that I was alive. It reminded me that I had a job to do. When I got back to the house, it was quiet. Darius and Veronica had left, presumably to go home and wait for the news from Canada. Now came the theater. I walked into my own house. I looked around at the photos on the wall. Me and my late wife, Sarah. Me and Darius at his graduation. A lifetime of memories built on trust. I took a deep breath and grabbed a heavy brass lamp from the end table. I threw it against the wall. The crash was satisfying. The bulb shattered, glass sprang across the floor. I tipped over the coffee table. I pulled the drawers out of the desk and dumped the papers on the floor. I opened the back door and used a screwdriver to gouge the lock, making it look forced. I was staging a crime scene, a break-in, a kidnapping, or maybe just a frantic flight. I wanted them to come back and see chaos. I wanted them to think that whatever happened in Canada had started here. Then I vanished. I didn't leave town. I didn't go to a hotel. I went to the crawl space under the house. It was a tight squeeze, accessed through a panel in the pantry floor. I had built it years ago as a storm shelter, stocked with water, dried food, and a sleeping bag. It was dry, it was hidden, and most importantly, it was directly under the living room floorboards. I crawled in, pulling the panel shut above me. I lay in the dark, smelling the earth and the damp wood. I put on my headphones and connected them to the receiver that picked up the audio from the living room bugs. I waited. It didn't take long. At 8 a.m., I heard the sound of the front door being kicked open. "Dad!" Darius screamed. "Dad, are you here?" I heard running footsteps, heavy, panicked strides. "Oh my God," Veronica said, her voice echoing through the floorboards right above my head. "Look at this place." "Someone was here," Darius hyperventilated. "Someone broke in. Maybe the cartel. Maybe they came for him before he left." "Don't be stupid," Veronica snapped. "The tracker is in Montreal. He drove the car. This looks like a struggle. Maybe he fought them. Maybe they forced him to drive." I heard the sound of furniture being moved. I heard drawers being rifled through. "Is the safe open?" Veronica asked, her voice sharp with greed. "No," Darius replied. "It is locked." "Damn it," she muttered. They walked into the kitchen. I could hear their footsteps clearly. Thump, thump. "What do we do now, Ronnie?" Darius asked, his voice trembling. "If he is in Canada and the car is rigged, he is going to die. We sent him to his death." "We didn't send him," Veronica corrected, her tone icy. "He went. He chose to drive." "We tricked him," Darius shouted. "We put a bomb in his car." "Lower your voice," Veronica hissed. "Do you want the neighbors to hear? Listen to me. This is actually good for us." "Good? How is this good? Think, Darius. If he disappears in Canada, if the car explodes and there is no body, we file a missing person report here. We show the police this house. We say he was kidnapped, or we say he had a break-in and ran away in a panic. And then what? And then we wait 7 years for him to be declared dead in absentia? No. We have the life insurance policy, the one I had him sign last year. "The accidental death rider," Darius whispered. "Exactly," Veronica said. "If he dies in a car accident or an explosion, it pays double. $2 million, Darius. That pays off the cartel. That pays off the mortgage. That pays for everything." I lay in the dark, my hands clenched into fists so tight my fingernails dug into my palms. $2 million. That was the price of my life. That was the math she had done. "But what if he survives?" Darius asked, a glimmer of hope in his voice. "What if he finds the drugs? What if he goes to the cops?" "He won't," Veronica said with a chilling confidence. "He is 71. He trusts us. He thinks we are protecting him. Even if he finds the stuff, he will be too scared to call the police because he knows it will implicate you. He will try to fix it himself. And that is when the cartel will get him." She laughed. It was a short, dry sound. "Honestly, Darius, it is better this way." The old man was dead weight anyway. He was just taking up space in that big house. Now he is finally useful. I closed my eyes. Tears leaked out, hot and salty, tracking through the dust on my face. Dead weight. Useful. I wasn't crying because I was scared. I was crying because the last thread of love I had for them had just snapped. I listened as they moved through the house, planning their next moves. They talked about calling the police to report me missing in a few hours, to establish a timeline. They talked about how to spend the insurance money. Let them talk. Let them plan. I checked the battery on my receiver, full charge. I checked the audio recorder, recording. "You think I am dead weight, Veronica. You think I am useful. You are right. I am useful. I am about to be the most useful mechanic you have ever met, because I am going to take apart your life piece by piece until there is nothing left but the truth. And when I am done, you are going to wish you had just let me drive that car into the river." I settled into the dirt, listening to the footsteps of my enemies walking on the floor I had built. The ghost was awake, and he was hungry for justice. I crawled out from under my own house like a thief in the night, my knees scraping against the dirt, my heart heavy with a truth that was harder to carry than any engine block I had ever lifted. I made my way through the woods behind my property, sticking to the shadows, moving toward the highway where Big Mike was waiting for me in his cab. Mike had just finished his run to Canada and back. He hadn't asked questions when I mailed him the package, and he didn't ask questions now when I climbed into his passenger seat covered in dust and spiderwebs. He just handed me a thermos of black coffee and drove. We went to his place, a small cabin off the grid about 20 miles north. It was quiet there. It was safe. But inside my head, the noise was deafening. I sat at Mike's kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from the coffee cup. I wasn't thinking about the drugs in my car door panels. I wasn't thinking about the bomb. I was thinking about a Sunday afternoon 2 years ago. I closed my eyes and I could see it as clearly as if it were happening right in front of me. It was Thanksgiving. Veronica had made a turkey that was too dry, but I ate it with a smile because that is what a father does. After dessert, she cleared the table and brought out a leather portfolio. She had that smile on her face, the one that showed too many teeth, the one I used to think was just eagerness, but now recognized as the grin of a shark. "Dad," she had said, sliding a stack of papers across the mahogany table. "Darius and I have been talking. You are getting older, and the tax laws are changing. We want to protect your legacy." My legacy. That was the word she used. She told me about a new insurance vehicle, a special kind of policy that doubled as a tax-free investment shelter. She used big words like compound interest and liquidity and beneficiary protections. Darius sat next to her, staring at his plate, nodding like a bobblehead doll every time she paused for breath. I trusted them. I trusted the son I had raised and the woman he had chosen. So I picked up the pen. I didn't read the fine print. I signed my name on the dotted line. Now sitting in Mike's cabin, the pieces fell into place with a sickening click. It wasn't an investment. It was a life insurance policy, a massive one. $2 million in coverage, with a double indemnity clause for accidental death. That was the long game. They had been paying the premiums on my life for 2 years, waiting for the right moment to cash out. And sending me to Canada with a bomb in my gas tank wasn't a frantic, last-minute decision to pay a drug debt. It was the closing ceremony of a plan they had hatched while eating my food and drinking my wine. I needed to know how deep the rot went. I borrowed Mike's laptop. I didn't want to log into my bank accounts directly, fearing they might have alerts set up, but public records are a different story. I went to the Fulton County Deed Recorder's website. I typed in my address, the house I had bought with my late wife Sarah in 1980, the house we had paid off 10 years early by skipping vacations and eating leftovers, should have been free and clear. The search result loaded, and I felt the air leave my lungs. There was a lien on the property, a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit taken out 18 months ago for $300,000. I clicked on the document image. I zoomed in on the signature line. There it was, Isaiah Jefferson. It looked like my signature. The loop on the J was perfect. The slant was right. But the ink pressure was wrong. It was a tracing, a forgery. And the notary stamp belonged to a woman named Jessica Thorne, Veronica's best friend from her real estate office. They hadn't just tried to kill me. They had already stolen everything I owned. The house wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the bank. They had drained the equity to fund their lifestyle, to pay for the BMW, the designer clothes, and apparently the gambling debts that had led them to the cartel. I was a tenant in my own life, waiting to be evicted by an explosion. I slammed the laptop shut, the sound echoing in the small cabin like a gunshot. Rage is a funny thing. At first it burns hot, like a flare, but then, if you let it sit, it turns cold. It turns into ice. And I was freezing. I put my headphones back on. I had left the receiver running, recording the audio from the bugs in my house. I needed to know what they were doing. I needed to know the enemy's next move. The audio was crackly, but intelligible. The silence in my house had been replaced by the sound of panic. "He is not answering." That was Darius. He sounded like he was hyperventilating. I called the burner phone they gave us, the cartel guys. They said the mule has vanished. The signal is gone. "What do you mean, gone?" Veronica's voice was shrill, bordering on hysterical. "I mean gone, Ronnie. The GPS isn't pinging in the river anymore, it just stopped. And the contact, he said if the package isn't delivered to the secondary drop point by midnight tomorrow, they are coming for us. There was a pause. Then the sound of glass shattering. Darius must have thrown something. 48 hours, Ronnie. We have 48 hours to find 5 kilos of cocaine or pay them $200,000. We don't have the money. You spent the loan money. Shut up, I am thinking, Veronica screamed back. I listened to them turn on each other. The veneer of their marriage was peeling away, revealing the rot underneath. They were terrified, not of the police, not of losing me. They were terrified of a man named Hector. Hector called. Darius whimpered. He said he knows where we live. He said he knows about the insurance policy. He said if he doesn't get his product, he is going to collect the debt in blood. He said he will start with my fingers. I took the headphones off. 48 hours, 2 days. That was the timeline. I looked out the window of the cabin. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and angry red. I had a choice. I could disappear. I could take my truck, drive west, change my name, and live out my days as a ghost. Let the cartel find them. Let them reap what they had sown. It would be justice. Biblical justice. But then I thought about Sarah. I thought about the woman who made me promise to look after our boy on her deathbed. She didn't know he would turn into this. She didn't know he would become a monster. But she was his mother. And as much as I wanted to watch them burn, I knew I couldn't let my son be butchered by a gang of thugs, not without giving him one last chance to choose redemption. And Veronica. I wasn't going to let the cartel kill her. That was too easy, too quick. She deserved a slower dismantling. She deserved to lose the one thing she loved more than life itself, her freedom and her reputation. I stood up. My knees popped. My back ached. I was 71 years old, tired, and heartbroken. But I was also the man who held the keys to their survival. I had the car. I had the drugs. I was the one in control. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a prepaid burner phone I had bought at the truck stop. I punched in a number I knew by heart, Veronica's cell phone. I didn't call. A call could be traced. A call gave them a voice to latch onto. I typed a text message. My thumbs hovered over the keypad, heavy with the weight of what I was about to do. I was about to step out of the shadows and into the line of fire. I know what you are looking for. I know about the insurance. I know about the mortgage. And I have the package. If you want to live, come to the old scrapyard on Industrial Boulevard. Alone. Midnight. If I see Darius, I burn the car. I hit send. I stared at the screen until the delivered notification popped up. The game had changed. They were hunting a senile old man who had wandered off. They were about to meet the veteran who knew how to set a trap. I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the hunter. And I was waiting in the junkyard of broken things, ready to see if anything from my former life was worth salvaging, or if it all needed to be crushed. The air in the salvage yard tasted of rust and oil, a metallic tang that sat heavy on the tongue. It was midnight, and the moon was hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds, turning the mountains of crushed cars into jagged, looming shadows. I sat in the operator cabin of the magnetic crane suspended 30 feet above the ground. From up here, I could see everything. I was the king of this graveyard of machines. I had a thermos of coffee, a pair of night vision binoculars, and a control panel I had rewired hours ago. I wasn't just hiding, I was hunting. I checked the monitor of the audio recorder sitting on the dashboard. The red light was steady. It was ready to catch a ghost. I had sent the text to Veronica at sunset, giving her a location and a time. I told her to come alone. I told her I knew about the insurance. I told her I had the package. Any decent human being, any daughter-in-law with a shred of conscience would have called the police. She would have come begging for forgiveness. She would have come to save the man she called Dad. But Veronica didn't come to save me. At 12:15, headlights cut through the darkness at the main gate. It wasn't the silver BMW. It was a nondescript black sedan, probably a rental. Smart. She didn't want her own plates on camera. She pulled into the center of the yard, the tires crunching loudly on the gravel and broken glass. The car stopped. The engine idled for a moment, sending plumes of white exhaust into the cold night air. Then the door opened. Veronica stepped out. She wasn't wearing her usual real estate agent blazer. She was wearing a long trench coat and leather gloves. She looked around, her eyes scanning the shadows. She didn't look scared. She looked angry. She looked impatient. And then I saw it. Her right hand didn't leave her pocket. It stayed deep inside the coat, gripping something heavy. The fabric pulled tight against the outline of a barrel. A gun. My heart turned to stone in my chest. I had suspected it, but seeing it was different. She hadn't come to pay me off. She hadn't come to negotiate. She had come to execute a 71-year-old man and leave his body to rot under a pile of scrap metal. She wanted to erase the only witness to her crimes. I reached for the microphone of the PA system. I had routed it through a voice modulator I scavenged from an old toy and wired into the yard's loudspeaker network. I didn't want her to hear Ike Jefferson. I wanted her to hear her worst nightmare. I flipped the switch. "Turn off the engine," my voice boomed across the yard. It was a distorted, deep mechanical growl that echoed off the walls of corrugated steel. Veronica jumped a foot in the air. She spun around trying to locate the source of the sound, but the speakers were everywhere. "Who is there?" she screamed, her voice shrill and thin in the vastness of the yard. "Show yourself!" I watched her through the binoculars. She had pulled the gun out. It was a small 9mm, black and lethal. She held it with two hands, sweeping the darkness. She was ready to kill. "Drop the weapon, Veronica," the voice commanded, "or we crush the car with you inside it." She hesitated. She looked at the towering stacks of cars around her, realizing for the first time how small she was. She slowly lowered the gun, but she didn't drop it. She kept it by her leg, ready to snap up. "Where is the old man?" she shouted, trying to sound brave. "I got a text. It said to meet here. I have the money." "You are lying," I said into the mic. "I can see your hands. I don't see a bag of money. I see a pistol. Is that how you pay your debts?" "I want to see Ike Jefferson," she demanded, taking a step forward. "Bring him out. The deal was with him." "Ike Jefferson is gone," I lied, my thumb hovering over the record button. "We intercepted him at the border. The old fool didn't know what he was carrying. We took the car, we took the package, and we disposed of the driver." I waited. I held my breath. This was the moment. If she had any humanity left, this was when she would break. This was when she would cry out for me. But she didn't cry. She didn't gasp. Her shoulders actually relaxed. She lowered the gun completely. "He is dead," she asked. Her voice wasn't sad. It was calculating. "Does it matter?" I asked. "No," she shouted back, and the word hit me harder than a bullet. "No, it doesn't matter. I don't care about the old man. He was dead weight anyway. If you killed him, you did me a favor." I felt a tear slide down my cheek in the dark cabin. I wiped it away angrily. I needed more. I needed the confession. "So you don't care about the body," I prodded. "Then what are you doing here?" "I want the car!" she screamed, losing her composure. "I want the Buick! Do you know what is inside those door panels?" "There are 5 kilos of pure cocaine inside that chassis. That is my product. That is my money. Gotcha." I hit the stop button on the recorder. She had said it, loud and clear. She admitted to the drugs. She admitted to wanting me dead. She admitted everything. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to say another word. I just sat back and watched the show. "Give it to me," she yelled at the silence. "I know you are watching. I will pay you. I will give you half. Just give me the car." She was unraveling. She started walking toward the nearest stack of cars, waving the gun around like a mad woman. But then a new sound cut through the night. Sirens. Not one, not two, but a chorus of them. They were close, very close. I had called the narcotics tip line 20 minutes ago. I told them there was an armed transaction going down at the scrapyard involving a major shipment of cocaine. I told them the suspect was driving a black rental sedan. Veronica heard them too. She froze. Her head snapped toward the main gate. The blue and red lights were already reflecting off the low clouds, painting the scrapyard in a chaotic strobe effect. "No," she whimpered. "No, no, no." She looked at the gun in her hand. She realized what it looked like. A woman standing in a junkyard at midnight with a weapon and no money. She panicked. She threw the gun. It sailed through the air and landed with a clatter in a pile of old tires about 20 feet away. She turned and sprinted back to the rental car. She scrambled into the driver's seat, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life. She threw it into reverse, tires spinning in the gravel, spraying stones everywhere. She spun the car around, heading for the exit. She thought she could beat them. She thought she could slip past the cruisers before they blocked the entrance. I watched from my tower. Go ahead, run, I thought. Running just makes you look guiltier. She floored it. The rental car fishtailed as she hit the pavement of the access road. She was going 60 miles an hour, but she forgot one thing. I am a mechanic. I build things. And earlier that evening, I had installed a high-definition trail camera on the telephone pole right next to the exit. It was triggered by motion. As she sped past the pole, I saw the flash. Click, click, click. It caught everything. The license plate, the dent in the bumper she just made hitting the gate, and most importantly, through the windshield, it caught her face, a face twisted in pure animal terror. The police cruisers swarmed into the yard seconds later, but she was already gone, disappearing down the dark road. They would chase her. They would find the rental car abandoned somewhere. But it didn't matter if she got away tonight. I had the recording, I had the photo, and I had the 5 kilos of cocaine sitting safely in the trunk of the Buick, hidden 3 rows back. I waited until the police had cleared the area, searching the piles with flashlights, finding the gun she tossed. They bagged it as evidence. They didn't find me. They didn't look up 30 feet to the crane cabin. When silence finally returned to the yard, I climbed down. My legs felt heavy, like lead. I walked over to where the gun had landed. The police had taken it, but the outline in the dust remained. I stood there for a long time. The woman who had eaten at my table, who had called me Dad, had stood on this spot and bargained for my death. She hadn't shed a tear. She had treated my life like a transaction fee. I pulled my coat tighter around me against the chill. I wasn't Ike Jefferson the victim anymore. I was Ike Jefferson the witness. I walked back to the hidden Buick. I patted the hood. "We aren't done yet, old girl," I whispered to the car. I had the evidence to put Veronica away for life. But there was still one loose end. One heartbreaking, tragic loose end. Darius, my son. He wasn't in the car with her. He hadn't come to pull the trigger. But he knew. He knew she was coming here. He knew she had a gun, and he let her go. I needed to know why. I needed to look him in the eye one last time. I started the Buick. The rumble of the engine was the only sound in the world. I drove out of the back gate into the shadows, heading toward the one place I knew my son would be when his world was falling apart. The dive bar on 4th Street. It was time for a family reunion. The red tail lights of the police cruisers faded into the distance, taking Veronica's arrogance and her failures with them, but they didn't take my pain. Standing in that junkyard, watching the woman who tried to kill me speed away in a panic, I felt a cold satisfaction. But satisfaction is a cheap fuel. It burns hot and fast, and when it is gone, you are left with the ash. And the ash in my mouth was the realization that while Veronica pulled the trigger, my son had loaded the gun. I got back into the Buick. The engine rumbled to life, a steady, comforting sound in a world that had suddenly lost its axis. I didn't turn on the headlights immediately. I sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. I knew where Darius was. I didn't need a tracker for him. When Darius was scared, when the world got too big for him, he always went to the same place. It was a habit he picked up in his 20s, a place where the lights were low and the questions were few. I drove slowly out of the industrial district, the tires humming on the wet pavement. It had started to drizzle, a cold, miserable rain that slicked the streets of Atlanta and blurred the neon signs. I headed toward 4th Street. It wasn't the part of town where Veronica sold luxury condos. It was the part of town where dreams went to die, tucked between a pawn shop and a bail bondsman. The bar was called the Rusted Nail. Fitting. I parked the Buick in the alley 2 blocks over. I didn't want him to see the car. I wanted him to see me. I walked through the rain, pulling my collar up. I felt every year of my 71 years tonight. My bones felt heavy, weighed down by the betrayal. I pushed open the heavy wooden door of the bar. The smell hit me instantly. Stale beer, cheap cigarette smoke, and the sour scent of regret. It was quiet. A Tuesday night crowd consisting of 3 old men at the counter and a bartender who looked like he was carved out of granite. And there, in the back booth, shrouded in shadows, was my boy. Darius sat alone. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't looking at the TV. He was staring into a glass of amber liquid as if the answers to his life were written in the ice cubes. He looked smaller than I remembered. His shoulders were hunched, his expensive polo shirt rumpled. He was crying, not the loud, performative sobbing Veronica did when she wanted something. This was a silent, shaking grief, the kind that racks your body when you know you have crossed a line you can never uncross. I walked over to the booth. My boots made no sound on the sticky floor. I stood there for a moment, just watching him. I remembered holding him when he was a baby, marveling at how small his hands were. I remembered teaching him to change the oil on this very Buick, his face smudged with grease, smiling up at me. How did we get here? How did the boy who used to cry when he stepped on a bug become a man who would sell his father to a cartel? I slid into the booth opposite him. Darius didn't look up immediately. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, sniffling. "We are closed," he muttered, thinking I was the bartender coming to kick him out. "I am not the bartender," I said. My voice was low, rough, like gravel grinding in a mixer. Darius froze. His hand stopped halfway to his glass. He knew that voice. It was the voice that had read him bedtime stories. It was the voice that had scolded him when he failed math. It was the voice he thought was currently silenced at the bottom of a Canadian river. Slowly, terrifyingly slowly, he lifted his head. When his eyes met mine, the color drained from his face so fast I thought he was going to faint. His jaw dropped. His pupils dilated in pure, unadulterated horror. He pressed himself back against the vinyl seat as if trying to merge with the wall. "Dad," he whispered. The word was barely a breath. He looked at my clothes, my wet coat, my hands resting on the table, hands that were very much alive. You are dead," he stammered, his voice rising in panic. "The tracker, the river. You are a ghost." I reached out and grabbed his wrist. My grip was iron. I felt his pulse hammering like a trapped bird under his skin. "Ghosts don't have a grip, son," I said. "I am flesh and blood, the same blood you tried to spill tonight." Darius began to shake violently. His teeth chattered. Tears spilled over his cheeks, hot and fast. He tried to pull his hand away, but I held on. I needed him to feel me. I needed him to know that I was real, and that his crime was real. "Why are you here?" he choked out. Veronica said, "She said the car was gone. She said you were gone." "Veronica lies," I said. "That is what she does. But I want to hear the truth from you. Just once in your life, Darius. Look me in the eye and tell me the truth." I released his wrist. He didn't run. He slumped forward, putting his head on the table, his hands covering his face. "I am sorry," he sobbed. "I am so sorry, Pop." I didn't offer him comfort. I didn't pat his back. I sat there, a stone statue of judgment. "How much?" I asked. He looked up, confused, his eyes red and swollen. And, "What? How much was I worth, Darius?" I asked, my voice steady but cold as the rain outside. What was the price tag on my life? Was it enough to buy a new house, a new car? What did you sell me for? Darius flinched as if I had slapped him. He took a shuddering breath, wiping his nose. 500,000, he whispered. I stared at him. $500,000. $500,000. Veronica. She got into trouble, Pop. Real trouble. It started with the credit cards. She maxed them out trying to keep up appearances at the firm. Then she started gambling. Online poker. Crypto schemes. She lost everything. He looked down at his hands. She went to loan sharks, Pop. Not the bank. The bad kind. The kind that break legs. She borrowed $50,000, but with the interest, it ballooned. It got to $500,000 in 6 months. They came to the house. They threatened to cut her face. They threatened to kill me. So you decided to kill me instead, I said. No. No, Pop. Never, Darius pleaded, leaning across the table. That wasn't the plan. Not at first. We were just supposed to use the car. Veronica met a guy connected to the cartel. He said if we moved a shipment for him, just one shipment across the border, he would wipe a chunk of the debt. And the bomb, I asked. The C4 in the gas tank. Was that just for decoration? Darius squeezed his eyes shut. That was Veronica's idea. She said if you got caught, you would talk. She said we couldn't risk it. And she said, if there was an accident, the insurance, I finished for him. The $2 million policy. He nodded, unable to look at me. She did the math, Pop. She said you were old. She said you had lived a good life. She said one death would save 2 lives. She made it sound so logical. She twisted everything until it made sense. And I was so scared. I was so scared of the men coming for us. I looked at my son. I saw the weakness in him. It wasn't malice, it was cowardice. He was a man who had never learned to stand on his own 2 feet. So when the wind blew, he fell wherever his wife pushed him. But cowardice, I realized, can be just as deadly as hate. You let her put a bomb in my car, I said softly. You ate my barbecue, you smiled in my face, and you sent me to die so you wouldn't have to face your own mistakes. That isn't fear, Darius. That is betrayal. Darius slid out of the booth. He fell to his knees on the dirty floor of the bar, right there in front of God and the bartender. He grabbed my hand, burying his face in my palm. I know, he wept. I know I am going to hell. I hate myself, Pop. I wanted to call you, I swear. I picked up the phone 100 times, but she was always there. She was always watching. I looked down at the top of his head. I felt a crack in my heart, a fissure that went straight to the core. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to leave him there on the floor. But he was my boy. He was the only thing I had left of Sarah. Get up, I said, pulling my hand away. Get up, Darius. Jefferson men don't kneel. He slowly climbed back into the seat, wiping his face with a cocktail napkin. He looked exhausted, like a man who had run a marathon with a sack of bricks on his back. I went to the scrapyard, I said. I met your wife. Darius's eyes went wide. You saw her. I saw her. And I recorded her. She admitted to the drugs. She admitted to the plan. She tried to shoot me, Darius, or at least she tried to shoot the man she thought was holding the car. She brought a gun to a negotiation. Darius shook his head. She is crazy, Pop. She snapped weeks ago. The pressure. It broke her. The police are looking for her now, I said. I tipped them off. She ran. She is a fugitive. Darius let out a long breath, a sound of relief mixed with terror. It is over then. No, I said, it isn't over. The drugs are still in my car. The cartel is still waiting for their shipment. And you are still an accomplice to attempted murder. Darius looked at me, his eyes suddenly sharp with a new kind of fear. Not for himself, but for me. Pop, listen to me, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. You need to leave. You need to get out of Atlanta tonight. Why? I asked. Veronica is on the run. It isn't just Veronica, Darius said, leaning in close. When the tracker stopped, when she thought you had stolen the shipment, she made a call. Not to the cartel, she called a cleaner. A cleaner. A hitman, Pop, Darius said, the words tumbling out of him. A professional. She paid him the last of our cash. She told him to find you. She told him that if you weren't dead in the river, he had to make sure you were dead on land. She gave him your address. She gave him your description. She gave him everything. I sat back. A hitman. Veronica really had covered all her bases. She had a plan A, a plan B, and a nuclear option. He is good, Pop, Darius warned, gripping the edge of the table. Veronica said he used to work for the syndicates in Chicago. He doesn't leave loose ends. If she is on the run, she will call him. She will tell him to finish the job so there is no witness left to testify against her. She isn't going to stop. As long as you are breathing, you are the evidence that sends her to prison for life. I looked at the door of the bar. The rain was coming down harder now. I thought about my house, my fortress. It was compromised. They knew where I lived. Let him come, I said, feeling a cold calm settle over me. No, Pop. You don't understand, Darius cried. You have to run. I stood up. I buttoned my coat. I ran from the Viet Cong in '68, I said. I ran from grief when your mother died. I am done running, son. I looked down at him. You stay here. You keep your head down. If the police come, you tell them nothing. You let me handle this. But Pop, I walked away. I didn't look back. I couldn't bear to see him like that anymore. I walked out into the rain, the neon sign of the bar buzzing above my head. Veronica had sent a wolf to my door. She thought I was a sheep. She thought I was just an old man with a wrench and a bad back. She was about to find out that I wasn't the sheep. I was the shepherd. And when the wolf comes for the flock, the shepherd doesn't run. He loads his weapon. I got into the Buick. I didn't drive to a hotel. I didn't drive to the police station. I drove home. I had a house to prepare. I had tools to gather. and I had a welcome mat to lay out for a guest who was expecting an easy kill. The hunter was coming, but he was walking into a workshop where the mechanic knew every loose floorboard, every live wire, and every way to make a machine or a man stop working. I drove the Buick away from the bar, leaving my weeping son in the booth. I told him I was going home to prepare, but as I merged onto the rain-slicked highway, the soldier in me took over the wheel. If Veronica had hired a professional, going home was a mistake. My house was in a subdivision. I had neighbors. Mrs. Higgins next door walked her dog at 6 a.m. The Johnson kids played basketball in the driveway. If I turned my home into a kill zone, innocents would get hurt. And I had enough blood on my conscience tonight. I needed a place where no one would ask questions, a place where a loud noise was just another car backfiring. I drove to the Starlight Motel off the interstate. It was a roach motel, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask for ID if you paid cash. I parked the Buick round back, hiding it behind a dumpster filled with wet cardboard. I carried my tool bag inside. It wasn't a suitcase. It was a heavy canvas sack filled with the things I trusted: wrenches, wire cutters, duct tape, and a gallon jug of 10W40 motor oil I kept in the trunk. I checked into room 104. It was at the end of the row, ground floor. Perfect. I sat on the lumpy mattress and took out my burner phone. I knew Darius was compromised. I knew Veronica was likely listening to his calls or tracking his location, so I used him as bait. I sent him a text. I am at the Starlight, room 104. Tired. Going to sleep. Don't come here. I hit send. Then I turned the phone off and threw it in the toilet tank. The bait was in the water. Now I just had to wait for the shark. I didn't sleep. I worked. I looked at the room not as a guest, but as a mechanic. The floor was cheap linoleum, peeling at the corners. Good. Slick. I moved the heavy dresser in front of the window, blocking that point of entry. That left the door. The door was thin, hollow core wood with a flimsy chain lock. A child could kick it in. I took the gallon of motor oil. I didn't pour it all at once. I poured a thin, consistent layer right in front of the door, extending about 4 feet into the room. On the linoleum, it was invisible in the dim light, but it was slipperier than ice. Next, I went to the bedside lamp. I cut the cord with my wire strippers. I separated the copper strands, twisting them into 2 live prongs. I stripped a second cord from the TV and spliced them together to add length. I ran the wire along the baseboard, taping it down, ending right at the edge of the oil slick. I placed a metal ice bucket from the bathroom there, filled with water, and submerged the live wires inside. It wasn't enough to kill a man instantly, but 110 volts through water would lock your muscles up tight enough to make you wish you were dead. I sat in the chair in the far corner of the room facing the door. I held my favorite torque wrench in my lap. It was a 2-foot-long bar of solid steel. I turned off the lights. I waited. The rain hammered against the roof, masking the sound of tires on the pavement outside. I closed my eyes and breathed. In, out. I wasn't 71, I was 20. I was back in the jungle listening for a twig snap. At 3:15 a.m. I heard it. A car engine, low and quiet, moving slowly through the parking lot. It stopped. No door slam, just the soft click of a latch. Then footsteps, not the heavy drunk footsteps of the usual clientele. These were soft, measured, heel to toe. They stopped outside room 104. I gripped the wrench. My heart was a slow, steady drumbeat. The doorknob turned. Locked. I expected a kick. I expected violence. But this man was a professional. I heard the scratch of a pick gun. Click, click. The lock turned. The door eased open. A shadow stepped into the room. He was big. He wore a dark raincoat and held a suppressed pistol in his right hand. He moved with confidence, stepping into the room as if he owned it. His boot hit the oil. It happened in slow motion. His lead foot slid forward as if he were on a skating rink. His balance broke. His arms flailed to compensate. He went down hard, his back hitting the floor with a wet thud. The gun skittered out of his hand, sliding across the oily floor into the corner. He grunted, trying to scramble up, but the oil was everywhere. His gloves slipped. His boots couldn't find traction. Then his hand hit the metal ice bucket. The water sloshed out, completing the circuit I had rigged. The blue spark was bright in the dark room. The assassin arched his back, a guttural scream tearing from his throat as the electricity seized his muscles. He convulsed, shaking violently, his heels drumming a chaotic rhythm on the floor. I didn't watch. I moved. I unplugged the cord from the wall to cut the power. Then I stepped over the oil slick, careful of my footing, and brought the torque wrench down. I didn't aim for the head. I wasn't a murderer. I aimed for the collarbone. Crack! The man howled, clutching his shoulder. He tried to reach for a knife in his boot with his good hand. I swung again. This time, I hit his knee. "Stay down," I growled, standing over him like a tower of judgment. He glared up at me. He was younger than me, maybe 40, hard eyes, a scar running down his cheek. He looked at me with shock. He expected a sleeping old man. He found a nightmare. "Who are you?" he wheezed, pain etching lines into his face. "I am the mechanic," I said. "And you are broken." I didn't give him time to recover. I rolled him over, ignoring his groans. I used the heavy-duty zip ties I had in my bag, wrists behind the back, ankles together. I dragged him away from the oil and the water, propping him up against the wall. He spat blood onto the floor. "You are dead, old man," he rasped. "You just made it worse." I pulled up a chair and sat directly in front of him. I was breathing hard. My heart felt like it was fluttering in my chest. I wasn't as young as I used to be, but I had the high ground. "Who sent you?" I asked, though I already knew. He laughed. A wet, bubbling sound. "Go to hell." I picked up the torque wrench and tapped it gently against his broken knee. He flinched, sweat popping out on his forehead. "I asked you a question." He gritted his teeth. "The blonde," he hissed. "The real estate lady. She said you were a loose end. She said you were soft." "Soft," I repeated. I reached into his coat pocket. I pulled out his wallet, a fake ID, cash, and a phone. It was a sleek, black smartphone. It was locked, but he had Face ID enabled. I grabbed his hair and forced his head up, pointing the screen at his face. He tried to close his eyes, but I waited. The moment he blinked from the pain in his shoulder, the phone unlocked. I opened the messages. The last conversation was from a contact saved as Client V. I scrolled down. My stomach churned. The timestamp was from 30 minutes ago. "Target is at Starlight Motel, room 104. Use the silencer." Then a message from 10 minutes ago right before he entered the room. "Make sure he suffers. I want pictures. Kill the old man and bring the head back to me. I need to see it to believe it. Bring the head." I stared at the words. They were glowing on the screen, blue and cold. This wasn't just business. This was hatred. Veronica didn't just want me gone. She wanted to desecrate me. She wanted to hold a piece of me in her hands as a trophy of her victory. She was a monster I had welcomed into my family, a monster who had slept under my roof. I looked at the assassin. He was watching me read the messages. "She pays well," he muttered. "Double for the head." I stood up. I felt a change inside me. The last remnants of the grandfather, the kindly neighbor, the churchgoer, they evaporated in that dirty motel room. I took a picture of the assassin, bound and bleeding on the floor. I sent it to Client V. Then I typed a message. "Delivery failed. Return to sender." I hit send. I pocketed his phone. I picked up his gun from the corner, wiped the oil off it, and tucked it into my belt. I wasn't going to use it. I had something better. I had the truth. And I had 5 kilos of leverage sitting in the trunk of a Buick. I looked down at the man. "The police will be here in 10 minutes, I said. "I suggest you tell them everything, because if you don't, I will send this conversation to every cartel contact in your phone, and I will tell them you stole their money." His eyes went wide with genuine fear. "You wouldn't." "I am a soft old man, remember?" I said, grabbing my tool bag. "I don't know what I am doing." I walked out of room 104, into the rain. The night was dark, but my path was clear. Veronica wanted a head. I was going to give her one. But it wasn't going to be mine. It was going to be hers, on a silver platter for the authorities. I got back into the Buick. The engine roared to life. I drove toward the city, toward the dawn. The hunt wasn't over. It was just entering the final phase. And I was done playing defense. I sat in the driver's seat of the Buick with the rain drumming a relentless rhythm on the roof and pulled up the tracking app on my burner phone. The blue dot was hovering over a truck stop on the outskirts of Montreal. It was 700 miles away from the mess I was currently sitting in. but it was the most important pixel in the world. I dialed Big Mike. He picked up on the first ring, his voice sounding tinny and far away over the international connection. I asked him if he was close to the water. Mike told me he was looking at the St. Lawrence River right now, and that it was cold enough to freeze the breath in your lungs. I told him what I needed him to do. I told him to take the package out of the envelope, turn it on, and throw it as far as he could into the icy current. Mike didn't ask why. He just asked if I was sure. I told him I had never been more sure of anything in my life. I heard the rustle of the package opening, then a grunt of exertion, and then silence. I watched the screen. The blue dot moved. It left the solid line of the road. It hovered over the blue expanse of the map for a second, suspended in the digital air, and then it stopped. It bobbed slightly, drifting with the current before settling into a stationary position. To anyone watching that app, Isaiah Jefferson and his car had just gone off the bridge. I was underwater. I was gone. I hung up the phone and switched apps. I opened the feed from the cameras inside my house. I needed to see it. I needed to see the exact moment my family decided I was dead. The living room was dark, lit only by the glow of the television and the streetlights filtering through the blinds. Darius was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands, rocking back and forth. He looked like a man at a funeral. But Veronica was standing by the window, staring at her phone. I watched her face. I watched the tension drain out of her shoulders. I saw her eyes widen, not with horror, but with a sudden, sharp clarity. "It stopped," she whispered. The microphone in the smoke detector picked it up clearly. "Darius, look!" The signal stopped. "It is in the river." Darius looked up, his face streaked with tears. He scrambled over to her, grabbing her wrist to look at the screen. He let out a low, guttural moan that sounded like an animal in a trap. "He is dead," Darius choked out. "We killed him. He drowned, Ronnie. My father drowned in a freezing river because of us." Veronica pulled her hand away. She didn't look sad. She looked at the screen, then she looked at the clock on the wall, and then a slow, terrifying smile spread across her face. It wasn't a smile of relief. It was a smile of victory. "He is gone," she said, her voice steady. "The car is gone. The drugs are gone. And the problem is gone." She walked over to the liquor cabinet and poured herself a glass of wine. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. She took a long sip, savoring it, while her husband wept on the floor. "Get up, Darius," she commanded. "Stop crying. We have work to do." "Work," Darius stammered. "Dad is dead." "Yes," she said, sitting down in my armchair. "And that is a tragedy. But tragedies have paperwork." I watched in disbelief as she pulled out her laptop. She didn't call the Canadian authorities. She didn't call the hospitals in Montreal. She opened a spreadsheet. "We need to call the insurance company in the morning," she said, typing as she spoke. "We need to file a missing persons report with the Atlanta police first to establish the timeline. We will tell them he has been acting confused lately. We will tell them he took the car and vanished. When the Canadian police find the car in the river, it will confirm everything. Accidental death." She looked at Darius, her eyes cold and hard. "Do you know what this means, Darius? It means the double indemnity clause kicks in. $2 million, we can pay the cartel, we can pay off the house, we can start over." Darius looked at her like she was a stranger. "You are talking about money," he whispered. "My dad is dead and you are doing math." "I am saving our lives," she snapped. "Do you think the cartel cares about your grief? They want their money. And now, thanks to your father's accident, we have it." I closed the laptop. I couldn't watch anymore. I felt sick. A deep, hollow ache settled in my chest. I had just watched my daughter-in-law celebrate my death. She didn't mourn me. She liquidated me. To her, I wasn't a person. I was a winning lottery ticket that just happened to need to die to be cashed. I sat there in the dark of the Buick for a long time. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. I was a ghost now. Legally, socially, I was disappearing. But ghosts have one advantage. No one sees them coming. I started the car. I didn't turn on the headlights. I drove slowly out of the motel parking lot, keeping to the back roads. I wasn't going to the airport. I wasn't going to flee the state. I was going to the one place Veronica would never expect a dead man to go. The drive to downtown Atlanta took 20 minutes. The city was asleep, but the precinct never sleeps. I parked the Buick 3 blocks away, in a dark alley behind a dumpster. I checked the trunk one last time to make sure the evidence was secure. Then I walked. I walked past the homeless men sleeping on grates. I walked past the late-night bars closing down. I walked until I saw the blue globe lights of the police station. My reflection in the glass door of the precinct looked ragged. My eyes were bloodshot, my clothes were wrinkled, and I had a day's worth of stubble on my face. I looked like a man who had lost everything. And in a way, I had. I pushed the door open. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. The desk sergeant was a young guy, looking bored, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up when I approached the counter. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, his tone flat. "I need to speak to someone in narcotics," I said. The sergeant looked up then, scanning me. "Narcotics is busy. Unless you have an appointment or you are reporting a crime in progress, you can fill out a form over there." I leaned on the counter. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I just looked him dead in the eye with the weight of 40 years of mechanics work behind my stare. "I don't need a form, son," I said. "I need the captain." The sergeant sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Look, Pops, go home. Whatever it is, it can wait until morning." "It can't wait," I said. "And why is that?" he asked, reaching for his coffee. "Because," I said, reaching into my pocket. The sergeant's hand dropped to his holster instantly. I pulled my hand out slowly. I wasn't holding a weapon. I was holding the plastic baggie I had taken from the door panel of my car. Inside was a small sample of white powder I had scraped off the brick. I placed the baggie on the counter. "Because I have 20 kilos of this sitting in my car," I said, "and I have the names of the people who put it there." The sergeant stared at the bag. He stared at me. The boredom vanished from his face, replaced by pure adrenaline. He picked up his radio, his eyes never leaving mine. "We need a squad in the lobby," he said into the mic, his voice tight. "Right now." I stood there, waiting for the swarm. I wasn't Ike Jefferson the victim. I wasn't Ike Jefferson the father. I was the informant. And I was about to light a match that would burn Veronica's celebration to the ground. The interrogation room smelled like stale coffee and bad decisions. I sat at a metal table that was bolted to the floor, my hands resting flat on the cold surface. Across from me sat a man who introduced himself as Detective Miller. He looked tired. He had bags under his eyes that were big enough to carry groceries, and he looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. To him, I was just another confused senior citizen who had wandered into the precinct with a wild story. I had told him about the tracker. I had told him about the bomb. I had told him about the cartel. Miller sighed and rubbed his temples. "Mr. Jefferson, let me get this straight. You claim your son and his wife turned your 1987 Buick into a drug mule. You claim they rigged it with explosives. And you claim that you just drove that same car here, parked it around the block, and walked in with a pocket full of cocaine." I nodded. "That is correct." Miller leaned back, clicking his pen. "Sir, we checked your record. You are a decorated veteran. You have lived in this city for 40 years without so much as a speeding ticket. But this story, it sounds like something from a movie. We called your house." Your daughter-in-law answered. She was crying. She said you have been suffering from dementia. She said you wandered off yesterday and they have been terrified. She is actually filing a missing persons report right now. I felt a cold fire in my chest. Veronica was good. She was ahead of the curve. She was already painting the narrative, turning me into the senile old man so that anything I said would be dismissed as the ramblings of a broken mind. I reached into my jacket pocket. Miller tensed, his hand dropping to his holster. "Easy, detective," I said, my voice steady. "I am just getting my phone." I pulled out the burner phone I had used in the junkyard. I set it on the table. "You think I am crazy," I said. "You think my mind is gone. That is fine. But machines don't have dementia. Machines don't lie." I pressed play on the audio file. The room filled with the sound of static, and then, clear as a bell, Veronica's voice cut through the air. "I want the car! Do you know what is inside those door panels? There are 5 kilos of pure cocaine inside that chassis. That is my product. That is my money." Miller froze. His pen stopped clicking. He stared at the phone. The recording continued, the sound of Veronica screaming, the sound of her panic, the sound of her admitting that I was dead weight. I let it play until the end, until the sound of her tires spinning in the gravel faded away. I stopped the recording. Then, I reached into my other pocket and pulled out the plastic baggie with the white powder. I slid it across the metal table. "Test that," I said, "and then tell me I am crazy." Miller didn't say a word. He stood up, picked up the baggie, and walked out of the room. I sat alone in the silence for 10 minutes. I didn't fidget. I didn't pace. I just breathed. I was a soldier again, waiting for the command. When Miller came back, he wasn't alone. A woman in a suit walked in with him. She introduced herself as Agent Vance from the DEA. The air in the room had changed. The pity was gone. It was replaced by intensity. "Mr. Jefferson," Agent Vance said, sitting down, "the substance you provided tested positive for high-grade cocaine. And the voice on that recording, we have been trying to link that supply chain to a local distributor for months. You just handed us the missing link." "So arrest her," I said. "Go to my house. Pick her up." "It isn't that simple," Vance said. "If we arrest her now, we get her for possession and maybe conspiracy. But we want the whole snake. We want the people she owes money to. We want the people who are going to receive that car in Florida." She leaned in close. "We need the transaction to happen, Ike. We need the car to arrive." I looked at her. I knew what she was asking before she said it. "You want me to go back?" I said. Vance nodded. "We want you to drive the car home. We want you to play the role she cast you in. You are the confused old man. You got lost. The GPS broke. You wandered around for 24 hours and then you came home." "And the tracker?" I asked. "She thinks it is in Canada." "We will tell you what to say," Vance said. "You tell her you found a black box on your car and threw it away because you didn't know what it was. You tell her you just drove around aimlessly. If she believes me, she will try to take the drugs," I said. "Exactly," Vance said. "And when she moves that product, or when she calls her contact to tell them the car is back, we will be listening. We are going to wire you up, Ike. We are going to have a tactical team in a van down the street. We will be watching every move, but we need you inside the house. We need you to be the bait." It was a suicide mission. Veronica had already hired a hitman to kill me. She had already rigged my car to explode. Walking back into that house was walking into a lion's den with a stake tied around my neck. But then I thought about Darius. I thought about him weeping in the bar. If the police raided the house now, Darius would go down for everything alongside her. But if I went back, if I could get Veronica to admit that she coerced him, maybe I could save him. Or maybe I just wanted to see the look on her face when the dead man walked through the front door. "I will do it," I said. The next hour was a blur of activity. They taped a wire to my chest, hiding it under my flannel shirt. They gave me a panic word. They briefed me on the cover story. They checked the Buick, removing the rest of the drugs from the door panels and replacing them with dummy packages that looked identical but were filled with harmless powder. They didn't want 20 kilos of real cocaine walking out the door if things went south. At 7 a.m., I was back in the driver's seat of the Buick Grand National. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful, crisp morning in Atlanta. The birds were singing, people were walking their dogs. It looked like a normal day, but inside the car, the air felt heavy. I drove toward my subdivision. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. I had faced enemy fire in the jungle, but this was different. This was personal. I was driving toward the people I loved, knowing that I was about to destroy them. I turned onto my street. The houses looked the same as they always did. Manicured lawns, mailboxes standing in neat rows. I saw my house at the end of the cul-de-sac. The silver BMW was in the driveway. The lights were on in the living room. They were awake. My heart hammered against the wire taped to my chest. I hoped the tech guys in the van could filter out the sound of my pulse, because it sounded like a drum solo in my ears. I pulled into the driveway. I didn't rush. I parked the car right next to the BMW. I turned off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there. This was it, the point of no return. Once I opened this door, the lie began. I stepped out of the car. I made sure to hunch my shoulders. I shuffled my feet. I put on the mask of the tired, confused old man. I walked up the path to the front door. Before I could even reach for the knob, the door flew open. Veronica stood there. She was wearing a silk robe, holding a coffee mug. Her hair was messy. She looked like she hadn't slept. She looked like a woman who was mourning her dead father-in-law and counting her millions. She looked at me. Her mug slipped from her fingers. It hit the porch tiles and shattered, splashing hot coffee over her bare feet. She didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She just stared. Her face went completely white, like all the blood had been drained out of her in a single second. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was looking at a ghost. She was looking at a dead man walking. She was looking at her nightmare. Behind her, Darius appeared in the hallway looking disheveled and broken. He saw me over her shoulder. His eyes went wide and he grabbed the doorframe for support. I looked at Veronica. I gave her a small, confused smile. "Hello, Ronnie," I said, my voice shaking just the right amount. "I think I got a little lost. Is breakfast ready?" Veronica took a step back, stumbling over the broken pottery. She looked at the Buick in the driveway. She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw the gears turning. I saw the shock turn to terror, and then, slowly, terrifyingly, back to calculation. The dead man was home, and the devil was welcoming him in. I stepped over the shattered ceramic of the coffee mug on the porch and crossed the threshold into my own home. The air inside felt different. It used to smell like lemon polish and old books, the scent of a life well lived. Now it smelled of stale fear and expensive perfume. Veronica was still standing there, her bare foot bleeding slightly where a shard of the mug had grazed her, but she didn't seem to notice. She was staring at me with eyes that were trying to process a miracle she didn't want. I hunched my shoulders, letting my posture collapse just enough to sell the lie. I dragged my feet on the hardwood floor, shuffling like a man whose bones were made of lead. I looked at Darius. He was pressed against the hallway wall, his face a mask of absolute terror. He knew the truth. He knew I wasn't confused. He knew I had driven that Buick here with a wire taped to my chest and a police van listening to every heartbeat, but he couldn't say a word. If he spoke, if he cracked, Veronica would know he had betrayed her too. I turned my gaze to Veronica and gave her a weak, apologetic smile. "I am so sorry, Ronnie," I rasped, my voice trembling. "I didn't mean to worry you. I just wanted to take a drive. I wanted to clear my head like you suggested." Veronica blinked, the shock slowly receding, replaced by that sharp, predatory calculation I had seen in the junkyard. She forced a smile onto her face. It was tight, stretching the skin over her cheekbones until it looked painful. "Dad," she breathed, her voice dropping into a register of fake concern that made my skin crawl. We thought you were gone. The tracker app, it showed you in Canada." "Canada?" I asked, furrowing my brow. I let out a confused chuckle. "No, honey. I didn't go to Canada. I barely made it past the state line. I got confused. The roads all look the same at night. And then that GPS thing, the black box under the car." Veronica froze. Her eyes locked onto mine. "You found the box?" I nodded, acting embarrassed. I heard a rattling sound when I stopped for gas. I looked under the wheel and there was this black plastic thing hanging loose. I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe it was a part of the muffler falling off. So I pulled it off and threw it in the bed of a truck parked next to me. I rubbed the back of my neck. I hoped that wasn't important. Veronica let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. She looked at Darius, her eyes gleaming. She bought it. She believed that the senile old man had accidentally discarded the tracker onto a long-haul truck. It explained everything. It explained why the signal went north. It explained why I was standing here alive. "No, Dad," she said, her voice gaining strength. "It wasn't important. It was just a diagnostic tool for the engine." She walked over to me and placed a hand on my arm. Her touch was cold. "And the car?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Is the car running okay? Did you have any trouble with the doors or anything else?" She was fishing. She wanted to know if I had found the drugs. "The car is fine," I said. "It runs like a dream. I just parked it right outside. I am just so tired, Ronnie. I drove all night trying to find my way back. I think I just need to sleep for a week." "Sleep," she repeated. The word hung in the air. She looked out the window at the Buick sitting in the driveway. I knew exactly what she was thinking. The mule was back. The payload was back. And the only thing standing between her and $5 million worth of cocaine was a tired old man. If I went to sleep, she could go out there. She could strip the panels. She could call her contact and save her life. But first, she had to make sure I stayed asleep. "You look exhausted, Dad," she said, guiding me toward the living room. "Come sit down. Darius, help your father to the recliner." Darius peeled himself off the wall. He walked toward me like he was walking to the gallows. He took my arm. His hand was shaking so violently I could feel the vibrations through my flannel shirt. He squeezed my arm, hard. It was a warning. But he didn't say anything. I sank into the leather recliner, letting out a groan of genuine fatigue. The wire taped to my chest was itching, and the weight of the moment was crushing. Veronica stood over me. "You need something to help you relax," she said. "You are shaking. Let me make you some tea." "I don't need tea," I said. "Just a nap." "No, I insist," she said, and there was steel in her voice now. "My grandmother's recipe. Chamomile and valerian root. It will knock you right out. You need the rest, Dad. You have had a long journey." She didn't wait for an answer. She turned and walked into the kitchen. I sat there with Darius. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the clink of a spoon against a ceramic mug in the kitchen. I could hear the water running. Darius stood in front of the fireplace staring at me. His eyes were wide, pleading. He knew what she was doing. He knew Veronica didn't keep valerian root in the cabinet. He knew she kept a bottle of liquid sedative she had stolen from a prescription she forged last year. She used it when she couldn't sleep. A few drops would knock out a horse. A heavy dose in a cup of tea for a 71-year-old man with a weak heart? That wasn't a nap. That was a coma, or worse. He opened his mouth to speak, but I tapped my chest subtly. I signaled him. The wire. The police. Don't blow it. He closed his mouth, biting his lip until it turned white. In the kitchen, Veronica was humming. It was a cheerful, mindless tune, the sound of a woman who thought she had just won the lottery. She was mixing the cocktail that would end my life, and she was humming. I closed my eyes and listened to the sounds of my house. This place used to be a sanctuary. Now it was a crime scene waiting for the chalk outline. I thought about the agents in the van down the street. Were they listening to the spoon stirring the poison? Were they getting ready to breach? Or were they waiting for me to take the first sip to prove intent? Agent Vance had said we need the transaction. Poisoning me was a transaction. It was an attempt to neutralize the witness and secure the goods. Veronica came back into the room. She was holding a large mug, steam rising from the surface. The smell hit me as she approached. It didn't smell like chamomile. It smelled bitter, masked by a heavy dose of honey. "Here we go," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "Drink this down, Dad. Every drop. It will make all the confusion go away." She handed me the mug. The ceramic was warm in my hands. I looked down at the dark liquid. It looked innocent. Just tea. But I knew better. I knew that one sip would put me on the floor, helpless while she gutted my car and then figured out how to dispose of me permanently. Veronica stood there, watching me. She wasn't moving. She was waiting for me to drink. Her eyes were fixed on the cup with a hunger that was terrifying. "Drink up," she urged, "before it gets cold." I lifted the cup slowly. My hand trembled, partly from age, partly from the act. I brought it halfway to my mouth. The steam brushed against my face. I paused. I looked over the rim of the cup. I didn't look at Veronica. I looked at Darius. My son was standing behind her. He was vibrating with fear. Tears were streaming down his face again. He was looking at the cup, then at me, then at the woman who controlled his life. This was the test, the final test. I had saved him in the bar. I had offered him redemption. But redemption isn't something you give. It is something you seize. He had watched her plan my death. He had watched her send me to Canada. He had watched her celebrate my drowning. And now, he was watching her hand me a cup of death in our own living room. If he stayed silent, he was lost. If he let me drink this, there was no coming back for him. Not in the eyes of the law, and not in the eyes of God. I held his gaze. I challenged him with my silence. Choose, son. Choose who you are. Veronica noticed the hesitation. She stepped closer, her patience fraying. Dad, what is wrong? She asked, her voice sharpening. Just drink it. It will help you. I moved the cup an inch closer to my lips. I opened my mouth. Darius let out a sound. It was a strangled, high-pitched whimper. I stopped. Veronica whipped her head around to look at him. What is your problem, Darius? Darius looked at her. He looked at the gun that I knew she kept in the drawer of the hallway table. He looked at the future she had promised him. And then he looked at his father sitting in the chair holding a cup of poison. His hands clenched into fists. His chest heaved. For 35 years he had been afraid. Afraid of the dark. Afraid of failure. Afraid of her. But in that moment, staring at the steam rising from the mug, something in him snapped. He took a step forward. Don't, Darius whispered. Veronica's eyes narrowed. Don't what? Darius took another step. His voice got louder, cracking with the weight of his terror. "Don't drink it, Dad." Veronica spun fully around, her face twisting into a snarl. "Shut up, Darius! He needs his medicine! It is not medicine!" Darius screamed, the sound tearing out of his throat like an explosion. He lunged. He didn't come for me. He came for the cup. Veronica tried to block him, but he shoved past her with a strength I didn't know he had. He reached out and slapped the mug from my hand. The cup flew across the room. It hit the fireplace mantel and shattered. The dark liquid splashed over the white bricks and hissed as it hit the hot logs of the fire. "No!" Veronica shrieked, looking at the spilled tea as if he had just spilled a bucket of diamonds. "You idiot! What are you doing?" Darius stood there, panting, his chest heaving. He looked at the mess on the floor, then he looked at Veronica. "I am done, Ronnie," he said, his voice shaking but defiant. "I am done killing my father for you." The room went deadly silent. The only sound was the hiss of the poisoned tea burning on the logs. Veronica stared at him. Her face went blank. The mask fell away completely. There was no more sweet daughter-in-law. There was no more concerned wife. There was only the cornered animal I had seen in the junkyard. She looked at the Buick outside. She looked at me. And then she looked at the drawer in the hallway table. "Fine," she whispered, her voice cold as the grave. She moved. She didn't run for the door. She didn't run for the car. She ran for the drawer. "Darius, get down!" I shouted, ripping the wire from my chest as I scrambled out of the recliner. But Veronica was fast. She yanked the drawer open. Her hand dived in and came out holding the snub-nosed .38 special she kept for protection. She didn't aim at me. She aimed at Darius. "You useless coward," she spat, pulling the hammer back. "If you won't help me, then you are just in the way." I lunged forward, not toward her, but toward my son. I had 71 years of life behind me. He had his whole future. "Gun!" I screamed for the benefit of the agents outside. "Gun! Gun!" But as I threw myself in front of Darius, I saw Veronica's finger tighten on the trigger, and I knew, with the clarity of a soldier, that the police weren't going to be fast enough. The sound of the ceramic mug shattering against the brick fireplace was louder than a gunshot in the quiet morning air. I watched the dark liquid hiss as it hit the hot logs, sending up a plume of steam that smelled burnt and sweet, like sugar turning to carbon. That was the smell of my death evaporating into the chimney. Darius stood there, his chest heaving, his hand still outstretched from where he had slapped the cup away. He looked terrified, but for the first time in his life he didn't look weak. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a long, suffocating nightmare to find himself standing on the edge of a cliff. Veronica stared at the mess on the hearth. She blinked once, twice, as if her brain couldn't process the rebellion. She looked at the wasted poison, then she looked at Darius, and her face contorted into something that wasn't human. It was the face of a cornered rat that realizes the trap has snapped shut. "You idiot!" she hissed, her voice low and vibrating with a rage so pure it felt hot from across the room. "You stupid, spineless little coward. Do you have any idea what you just did?" I didn't let him answer. I stepped between them, putting my body in front of my son. I could feel him shaking behind me, vibrating like a loose fender, but he didn't back away. "He saved me, Veronica," I said, my voice steady despite the wire taped to my chest itching against my skin. "He stopped you from committing murder. It is over. The police are going to find out. You need to stop this now." She laughed. It was a high, jagged sound that scraped against my nerves. "Stop. You think I can stop? There is no stopping, old man. There is only the money or the grave, and thanks to your idiot son, we just lost the easy way out." She moved so fast I almost missed it. She didn't run for the door. She lunged for the hallway console table, the antique oak piece where we used to keep the car keys and the mail. But I knew what else was in there. I knew because I had seen her put it there months ago, tucked under a pile of takeout menus. "Darius, run!" I shouted, shoving him back toward the kitchen, but it was too late. Veronica spun around, her hand gripping the snub-nosed .38 special she kept for home protection. The metal glinted in the morning sunlight streaming through the window. She wasn't holding it like a nervous homeowner. She was holding it with a white-knuckled grip, her finger tight on the trigger, the barrel wavering between my chest and Darius's head. "Get back!" she screamed. "Both of you! Get against the wall!" Darius froze. He put his hands up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Ronnie, put it down, please. You are not going to shoot us." "You don't know what I will do," she shrieked. Her hair was wild, flying around her face. Her silk robe was disheveled. She looked like a woman unraveling at the seams. "I did everything for us, Darius. I lied for you. I stole for you. I set this whole thing up so we could be free. And you throw it away because you suddenly found a conscience. You are useless." She waved the gun at me. "You, give me the keys." I looked at her. I looked at the gun. I knew the tactical team was in the van down the street. I knew they were listening. But I also knew that a bullet travels faster than a SWAT team can breach a door. If I made a move, if I tried to tackle her, she would pull that trigger. And she wouldn't aim for me. She would aim for the person whose betrayal hurt her the most. She would kill Darius just to spite me. I moved my hand slowly toward my pocket. "Easy, Veronica," I said, keeping my voice calm, the way you talk to a spooked horse. "The keys are right here. You want the car? Fine. Take the car. Just leave the boy out of it." "I don't want the car, you old fool," she spat. "I want what is inside it. I am not leaving here empty-handed. I am going to strip that chassis, and I am going to disappear before the cartel or the cops realize what happened. Now give me the keys." I pulled the keys to the Buick out of my pocket. The silver GM logo caught the light. I held them out. She snatched them from my hand, her fingernails scratching my palm. She backed away toward the front door, keeping the gun trained on us. Her eyes were darting around, manic and wild. "Don't follow me," she warned. "If I see either of you step onto that porch, I will put a bullet in you. I swear to God, I will do it." She fumbled with the doorknob, got the door open, and backed out into the bright morning sun. As soon as she was out, I turned to Darius. "Stay here. Stay low." "No, Dad," he gasped, grabbing my arm. "She is going to kill you." "She isn't going to kill anyone," I said. "Not if I can help it." I followed her. I didn't step onto the porch immediately. I watched from the sidelight window. Veronica was sprinting across the lawn to the driveway. She wasn't running gracefully. She was stumbling barefoot on the concrete, the silk robe flapping around her legs. She reached the Buick Grand National, my pride and joy, the car she had turned into a coffin. She didn't get in the driver's seat. She ran to the passenger side. She knew exactly where the stash was supposed to be. She knew because she had watched the tutorial videos on how to remove the door panels. She was desperate. She wasn't thinking about the neighbors watching. She wasn't thinking about the police. She was thinking about $5 million in white powder that was her ticket to a non-extradition country. I stepped out onto the porch. "Veronica!" I shouted. "It is over! Look around you!" She ignored me. She jammed the car key into the lock and threw the door open. She fell to her knees on the driveway, heedless of the gravel biting into her skin. She tucked the gun into the pocket of her robe so she could use both hands. She grabbed the edge of the plastic door panel. I walked down the steps. I had to keep her focused on the car. I had to keep her from realizing the street was too quiet, that the van parked 3 houses down hadn't moved in 2 hours. "Don't do it, Ronnie," I called out, walking slowly down the path. "You won't find what you are looking for." She ripped at the panel. A plastic clip snapped with a loud crack. "Shut up!" she screamed over her shoulder, not looking at me. "It is here! I know it is here! You are too stupid to find it! You said you only found the tracker! You didn't check the doors!" She braced her foot against the door frame and pulled with all her strength. Her face was twisted with exertion and greed. She was clawing at the car like an animal trying to get to the marrow of a bone. Another clip popped, then another. The panel hung loose. She tore it off completely, throwing the plastic piece onto the driveway with a clatter. There it was, the hollow metal cavity of the door, the secret compartment she had filled with 20 kilos of death. She reached in, her hands shaking with anticipation. She expected to feel the heavy taped bricks of cocaine. She expected to feel her salvation. Her hand groped in the darkness of the doorframe. I stopped 10 feet away. I crossed my arms. I waited. She froze. Her hand stopped moving. Her shoulders went rigid. She pulled her hand out. She wasn't holding a brick of cocaine. She wasn't holding a bag of money. She was holding a small folded triangle of fabric. She stared at it. It was a miniature American flag, the kind you buy at a hardware store for the 4th of July. And taped to the flag was a single piece of yellow notebook paper. Veronica dropped the flag. She ripped the note off and held it up to her face, her eyes scanning the single word written in thick black marker. I saw her lips move as she read it. Gotcha. She stared at the note. Then she stared at the empty door panel. It was clean, scrubbed. Empty. She let out a sound that wasn't a scream and wasn't a cry. It was the sound of a mind snapping. She scrambled up, looking into the door cavity again, as if her eyes were lying to her. She felt around frantically, scratching her arms on the metal. "Where is it?" she shrieked, turning to face me. Her eyes were bulging. "Where is it? What did you do with it?" I stood there, calm and still in the morning light. "I cleaned my car, Veronica," I said. "I told you, I am a mechanic. I fix things." She looked at me, and then she looked past me, to the street. She saw the van down the block sliding its door open. She saw the uniformed officers appearing from behind the neighbors' hedges. She saw the world closing in. She reached into her robe pocket. She pulled the gun out again. "You stole it!" she screamed, raising the weapon. "You stole my life!" She didn't aim at the police. She aimed right at my chest. "Drop the gun!" a voice boomed from a megaphone. "Federal agents! Drop the weapon!" Veronica didn't listen. She was too far gone. She was standing in the ruins of her own greed, holding a gun and a note that mocked her intelligence. She gritted her teeth, her finger tightening on the trigger. I didn't flinch. I looked her in the eye. "It is over, Ronnie," I said softly. "No," she whispered, tears of rage mixing with the sweat on her face. "It is only over when I say it is over." And then the air exploded. The sound of a gunshot in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac is different than it is in the movies. In the movies, it is a loud bang. In real life, it is a crack, a sharp, violent snap that breaks the air and leaves a ringing silence in its wake. Veronica pulled the trigger. I saw the tendon in her finger tighten. I saw the muzzle flash, a tiny star of fire in the morning sunlight. But I didn't feel the bullet. I had moved. Not with the speed of a young man, but with the instinct of a soldier who knows what a desperate enemy looks like right before they fire. I dropped to my knees behind the engine block of the Buick. The bullet slammed into the windshield, spiderwebbing the glass right where my head had been a second ago. She screamed. It was a sound of pure frustration. She racked the slide of the .38, a shell casing clinking onto the driveway. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was advancing. She was walking toward the front of the car, the gun extended, her eyes fixed on the spot where I was crouching. She was going to finish it. She was going to execute me on my own driveway because I was the only thing standing between her and the fantasy life she felt she was owed. "Die!" she shrieked. "Just die, old man!" I looked toward the house. Darius was standing in the doorway, paralyzed. He was watching his wife try to murder his father. "Get back, Darius!" I roared. "Get inside!" But he didn't move. He stared at her, his mouth open in horror. Veronica rounded the corner of the bumper. She had a clear line of sight. She raised the gun again, but she forgot one thing. She forgot that I had spent the last 24 hours preparing for war while she was planning a funeral, and she forgot that I had the garage door remote in my pocket. My thumb found the button. I pressed it. Inside the garage, I had rigged the work lights, 4,000 lumens of industrial LED floods, to the door opener circuit. As the heavy door began to rumble upward with a mechanical groan, the lights exploded into life. They were aimed low, directed straight out onto the driveway. The sudden wall of blinding white light hit Veronica in the face. She flinched, throwing her hand up to shield her eyes, the gun wavering. That split second of distraction was the signal. From the street, the world erupted. The black van down the block slid open. The hedges along the perimeter seemed to come alive. Men in heavy tactical gear swarmed the property. "Federal agents, drop the weapon. Get on the ground. Now!" The voices were booming, overlapping, a chaotic chorus of authority. Most people, when faced with a dozen assault rifles and a wall of shouting men, would drop the gun. They would realize the game was over. But Veronica wasn't most people. She was a narcissist who had been cornered. She had lost the money. She had lost the drugs. She had lost control. And in her twisted mind, surrender was an admission that she was ordinary. She didn't drop the gun. She turned toward the advancing officers. "You won't take me!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "It is mine! It is all mine!" She fired. She squeezed off a round blindly toward the street. The bullet hit the pavement, kicking up sparks. The response was immediate and overwhelming. I watched from behind the wheel of the Buick. I saw two officers take a knee. I saw the muzzles of their carbines flare. Pop, pop. Veronica's body jerked violently. Her right shoulder exploded in a mist of red. The force of the impact spun her around like a rag doll. She dropped the gun. It clattered onto the concrete. She fell hard, landing on her back, her silk robe spreading out around her like a pool of blood. She lay there for a second, staring up at the blue sky, shock etched onto her face. Then the pain hit her. She let out a wail that tore through the morning, a high, keen sound of agony. "My arm! You shot me! You shot me!" The SWAT team moved in. They were efficient, merciless. 2 men were on her in seconds. They rolled her over, ignoring her screams. They cuffed her hands behind her back, pulling the injured arm roughly. "Medical! We need a medic!" one officer shouted into his radio. "Suspect down! Secure!" I stood up slowly, using the hood of the car to support myself. My knees were shaking. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving a cold numbness in its wake. I looked at the woman who had sat at my Thanksgiving table. She was thrashing on the ground, spitting at the officers, cursing them, blaming me. She looked small. She looked pathetic. But then I remembered Darius. I turned toward the house. Darius was still standing in the doorway. He hadn't moved. He was staring at his wife bleeding on the driveway, his face pale as a sheet. Then he saw the second team of officers moving up the walkway. They weren't coming to check on him. They were coming for him. "Hands in the air! Step out of the house!" Darius blinked. He looked at me. His eyes were filled with tears. "Dad," he whispered. "Do what they say, son," I called out, my voice breaking. "Don't run. Just do what they say." Darius slowly raised his hands. He walked out onto the porch, stepping over the broken pieces of the coffee mug he had slapped from my hand just minutes ago. That mug, that act of rebellion, had saved my life, but it couldn't save him from the consequences of the last 6 months. 2 officers grabbed him. They spun him around and pushed him against the brick wall of the house. "Darius Jefferson, you are under arrest for conspiracy to distribute narcotics, attempted murder, and insurance fraud." I watched as they patted him down. I watched as they pulled his arms back. Click, click. The sound of the handcuffs locking on my son's wrists hurt more than the bullet that had shattered my windshield. It was a sound of finality. I walked up the path. An officer tried to stop me, putting a hand on my chest. "Sir, stay back. This is an active crime scene." "That is my son," I said, pushing his hand away gently. "I am not going to interfere. I just want to speak to him." The officer looked at the wire taped to my chest, visible under my open shirt. He knew who I was. He knew I was the informant. He stepped aside. I walked up to Darius. He was pressed against the wall, his cheek resting on the rough brick. He was crying softly. I stood next to him. I didn't touch him. I couldn't. "I am sorry, Pop," he sobbed. "I am so sorry." "I know, son," I said. "I know you are." Veronica was still screaming from the driveway as the paramedics loaded her onto a stretcher. She was shouting about lawsuits. She was shouting about her rights. Darius didn't look at her. He looked at me. "Did you know?" he asked. "Did you know she would shoot?" I nodded. I knew. When a predator is trapped, they bite. "Why didn't you let her kill me?" Darius whispered. "I deserve it. I let this happen. I signed the papers. I helped her with the car. I am just as guilty." I reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, just like I used to do when he was a boy and had a fever. "You are guilty, Darius," I said. "You made terrible choices. You were weak, but you are my son. And 10 minutes ago, when it mattered most, you knocked that cup out of my hand. You chose me over her." I looked into his eyes. "You're going to prison, son. I can't stop that, and I won't stop that. You have to pay for what you did. But you are alive. And as long as you are alive, you can be fixed." The officers pulled him away from the wall. "Let's go, Jefferson." They marched him down the path, past the flower beds his mother had planted, past the Buick that had almost been his inheritance, and toward the back of a squad car. I stood on the porch and watched them go. I watched the flashing blue lights reflect off the windows of my neighbors' houses. People were standing on their lawns in bathrobes, filming with their phones, whispering. They were witnessing the fall of the House of Jefferson. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Agent Vance. She had come out of the command van. She looked at the scene, then at me. "You did good, Ike," she said. "We got the whole network. Veronica's phone, it is unlocked. We have the messages to the cartel. We have the hitman. We have everything." I looked at her. I felt old, older than 71. "I lost my son," I said. "No," Vance said softly. "You saved his soul. If he had stayed with her, if he had let you drink that tea, he would have been lost forever. Today he goes to jail. But he goes as a man who finally stood up. She handed me a bottle of water. We need to get you to the station for a statement. And then you can go home. Home. I looked at the house. The front door was open. The living room was a mess of broken glass and spilled tea. The driveway was stained with Veronica's blood. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a battlefield. I walked down the steps. I walked past the Buick. I touched the hood one last time. It was just a car. Just metal and glass. But it had carried a heavy load. I got into the back of the agent's car. I didn't look back as we drove away. I kept my eyes forward. There was a lot of wreckage behind me, but I was a mechanic. I knew that before you can build something new, you have to clear away the debris. The demolition was over. Now the hard work of rebuilding was about to begin. The interrogation room was quiet now. The screaming was over. The sirens had faded. There was just the low hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and the taste of lukewarm water in a styrofoam cup. I sat on a metal chair that was bolted to the floor, my hands resting on the table. They were stained with grease from the Buick and dirt from the motel floor, the hands of a man who had spent 48 hours dismantling his own life. Detective Miller and Agent Vance walked in. They didn't look tired anymore. They looked like cats who had just dragged a very large, very ratty prize through the door. Agent Vance placed a file on the table. She looked at me, and for the first time since we met, she smiled. A real smile. "You have friends in high places, Ike," she said, "or at least friends in very cold places." I looked at her. I was thinking about Big Mike. I was thinking about that padded envelope I had handed him at the truck stop. "What happened?" I asked. Vance opened the file. She pulled out a grainy black and white photo. It looked like it was taken from a surveillance satellite or a high-altitude drone. It showed a frozen river. A hole had been chopped in the ice, and standing around that hole were 3 men bundled in heavy parkas, holding a rope. "The Royal Canadian Mounted Police sent us this an hour ago," Vance said. "Your friend Mike did exactly what you asked. He threw the tracker into the St. Lawrence River." I nodded. I told him to give it a swim. "Well," Vance continued, pointing at the photo, "Veronica's partners were watching that dot. When it stopped moving in the middle of the river, they didn't think you had thrown a GPS unit away. They thought the mule car had crashed off the bridge. They thought $5 million worth of cocaine was sitting on the riverbed." She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "They were desperate, Ike. The men in this photo, they are high-level enforcers for the Montreal Syndicate. They went out onto the ice in the middle of the night. They brought diving gear. They brought winches. They spent 4 hours cutting through the ice, risking hypothermia, trying to salvage their shipment." "And what did they find?" I asked, leaning forward. Vance slid another photo across the table. It was a close-up of a gloved hand holding a small, dripping black plastic box. "They fished out a $50 GPS tracker wrapped in bubble wrap," she said. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "But here is the best part," Vance said, her eyes gleaming. "The Canadian authorities were watching the whole time. They had been monitoring that stretch of the river because of suspicious activity. When these men pulled the tracker up, the Mounties swooped in. They arrested all 3 of them on the ice." She tapped the photo. "These aren't just street dealers, Ike. One of them is a lieutenant for the cartel. He started talking the moment he thawed out. He gave up his contacts. He gave up the supply chain. And most importantly, he gave up the name of the person in Atlanta who was supposed to deliver the car." "Veronica," I whispered. Vance nodded. "Veronica. This links her directly to an international drug trafficking and human smuggling ring. She isn't just looking at conspiracy charges in Georgia anymore. She is looking at federal charges, international extradition treaties. She is looking at life in prison without the possibility of parole. That little tracker you mailed, it didn't just save your life. It burned down their entire operation from the inside out." I looked at the picture of the black box. It was such a small thing, a piece of plastic and circuitry. My son had put it on my car to trap me. I had used it to trap them. It was poetic justice, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like survival. "So she is gone," I said. "She is locked away forever." "She is done," Miller confirmed. "She is already trying to cut a deal, blaming everyone from you to her husband, but with the Canadian evidence, no one is listening. She is a sinking ship, and the rats are drowning with her." Miller paused. He looked at me, his expression softening. Speaking of her husband, he said. My heart tightened. Darius. He is being processed downstairs, Miller said gently. The DA is looking at the case file. It is complicated, Ike. How complicated? I asked. He is an accessory to attempted murder, Miller said, ticking the counts off on his fingers. Conspiracy to distribute narcotics, insurance fraud, wire fraud. But he saved me, I interrupted, my voice rising. He knocked the cup out of my hand. He stopped her. Miller nodded. We know, and that matters. It matters a lot. It is the only reason he isn't facing a life sentence like Veronica. But Ike, he signed the papers. He helped rig the car. He knew about the plan for months. He stood by while she hired a hitman. You can't erase that with one good deed at the finish line. I rubbed my face with my hands. I knew he was right. The law is a machine. It deals in facts, not feelings. And the fact was, my son had broken the law a dozen times before he finally found his conscience. What are we looking at? I asked. The DA is offering a plea, Vance said, considering his cooperation, considering he saved the primary witness. They are looking at 10 years, maybe out in 5 with good behavior. 10 years. My son was 35. He would be 45 when he got out. He would miss the prime of his life. He would lose everything. Can I see him? I asked. Miller looked at Vance. She nodded. We can give you 10 minutes, Miller said. In the interview room. They led me down the hall. The station was buzzing with activity. People were celebrating the bust. I walked past a bulletin board where they had already pinned up Veronica's mugshot. She looked angry, defiant. They opened a heavy steel door. Darius was sitting at a small table. He wasn't wearing his expensive polo shirt anymore. He was wearing an Orange County jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big for him. His hands were cuffed to the table. He looked small. He looked like a child who had been sent to the principal's office. Only this time, there was no coming home after school. He looked up when I walked in. His eyes were red and swollen. "Pop!" he croaked. I sat down opposite him. The metal chair scraped loudly against the floor. There was a glass partition between us, but the room was small enough that I could smell the fear on him. I heard about the deal, I said. 10 years. Darius nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't cry. He just looked resigned. "It is better than I deserve," he whispered. "I tried to kill you, Pop. I let her talk me into it. I let her convince me that you were just a problem to be solved." "Why, Darius?" I asked. The question that had been burning a hole in my gut for 48 hours. "Why didn't you come to me? I have money. I have savings. I would have helped you." Darius looked down at his cuffed hands. "I was ashamed," he said. "You worked your whole life to give me everything. You sent me to college. You bought me my first car, and I blew it. I gambled it away. I let Veronica spend it. I couldn't look you in the eye and tell you that I was a failure. Veronica. She offered a way out where I didn't have to admit I was wrong. I could just be the victim, the grieving son." He looked up at me, tears spilling over. "I wanted to be the victim, Pop, because being the villain is too hard." I looked at him. I saw the weakness that had always been there, the soft spot in the steel that I had tried to ignore. I had protected him too much. I had shielded him from the hard knocks of the world, and in doing so, I had made him vulnerable to a predator like Veronica. "You aren't a victim, Darius," I said sternly. "And you aren't a villain. You are a man who made a choice. And now you have to live with it." "I know," he said. I leaned forward. "The tracker," I said. "The one on the car." Darius flinched. "The police found it," I told him. "In Canada. Veronica's friends got caught trying to fish it out of the river. That little box is the reason she is going away for life." Darius let out a bitter, choked laugh. "You outsmarted us at every turn, didn't you? Even when we thought we had won, you were 10 steps ahead." "I am a mechanic, son," I said. "I know how things work. And I know that when you build something on a rotten foundation, it collapses." We sat in silence for a moment. The air in the room was heavy with the things we couldn't say. "I am going to prison, Pop," Darius said, his voice trembling. "I am going to be in a cage." I reached out and placed my hand on the glass, right over where his hand was resting on the table. "You are going to prison," I agreed, "but you are alive. and I am alive. And that means there is still time. Time for what? He asked. Time to fix what is broken, I said. The door opened behind me. Detective Miller stuck his head in. Time is up, Ike. I stood up. I looked at my son one last time. He looked terrified. He looked lonely. I won't abandon you, Darius, I said. I will come to visit. I will put money in your commissary. I will be there, but I won't lie for you. You do your time. You stand up and take it like a man. And when you get out, we will see if there is enough left of us to rebuild. Darius nodded, tears streaming down his face. I love you, Pop, he whispered. I looked at him. I wanted to say it back. I wanted to tell him everything was going to be okay. But I couldn't lie. Not anymore. I love you too, son, I said. But God help me, I don't like you very much right now. I turned and walked out of the room. I heard Darius put his head down on the table and sob. It was a wrenching sound, but I kept walking. I walked out of the precinct into the bright, harsh sunlight of the afternoon. The case was closed. The bad guys were caught. The hero had survived. But as I stood on the sidewalk, watching the traffic roll by, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man who had just cut off his own arm to save his life. The wound was cauterized, but the phantom pain was going to last forever. The district attorney was a man named Sterling, who looked like he ironed his socks. He sat across from me in an office that smelled of lemon polish and ambition, tapping a gold pen against a file that was 3 inches thick. That file was the life of my son. It contained every mistake Darius had made in the last 6 months, every text message he had sent to Veronica, every wire transfer to the offshore gambling sites. Sterling looked at me with the cold calculation of a man who sees people as conviction statistics. He wanted me to take the stand. He wanted me to point a finger at the boy I had taught to ride a bike and tell a jury that he was a monster. He told me that if we buried Darius, we could ensure he went away for 15 years. He called it justice. He called it closure. I looked at Sterling and I felt a fire rising in my chest that had nothing to do with the law and everything to do with blood. I told him that he didn't understand the mechanics of what happened in that living room. I told him that the law sees black and white, but a father sees the gray. Yes, Darius was weak. Yes, he was a fool who let a woman with a heart of ice twist him into a knot. He had signed the papers. He had stood by while she planned my death. I wasn't denying that. But there was one moment that didn't fit into Sterling's narrative. There was one split second where the programming broke. I leaned across the mahogany desk. I asked Sterling if he had ever held a cup of poison in his hand. I asked him if he knew what it looked like when a man realizes he has gone too far. Darius didn't drink the tea. He didn't let me drink the tea. In the moment that mattered most, when the gun was on the table and the devil was whispering in his ear, my son chose me. He knocked that cup out of my hand. He saved my life. And you don't send a man to rot in a cage for 15 years when he is the reason you are still breathing to testify. Sterling didn't like that. He argued. He threatened. He told me I was being sentimental. He told me that Darius was a liability. But I was done listening to men who had never gotten their hands dirty fixing something that was broken. I stood up and walked out of his office. I didn't go home. I went to the bank. I had spent 40 years saving money. I fixed alternators and transmissions and saved every dime I could in a diversified portfolio that Veronica had tried so hard to steal. I walked into the bank manager's office and I liquidated it. All of it. The retirement fund, the emergency savings, the money I had set aside for a boat I would never buy. It came to a significant sum, the kind of money that buys freedom in America. I hired the best criminal defense attorney in Atlanta. His name was Kessler, and he cost $500 an hour just to answer the phone. He was a shark in a 3-piece suit, the kind of lawyer who made prosecutors sweat. I told him I didn't want an acquittal. An acquittal would be a lie. Darius was guilty. I wanted a deal. I wanted a chance at redemption. The negotiations took 3 days. I sat in hallways and waiting rooms drinking bad coffee while Kessler fought for my son's life. I offered full restitution. I offered to pay back the insurance company, the bank, even the debts Veronica had accrued, using every penny I had to my name. I was buying my son back from the system. I was paying the ransom that Veronica had tried to extract from my death, only I was paying it with my life's work to save him. The day of the sentencing, the courtroom was packed. The press was there, hungry for the final chapter of the suburban noir that had captivated the city. Veronica had already been arraigned, spitting venom at the cameras. Now it was Darius's turn. He stood before the judge in his orange jumpsuit, looking like a ghost. He expected the worst. He expected me to abandon him. He kept his head down, staring at his shackles, waiting for the hammer to fall. But when the judge asked if there were any statements, I stood up. I didn't need a script. I spoke from the gut. I told the court that my son was an idiot. I told them he was a coward who had lost his way. But I also told them that he was a victim of a master manipulator, and that underneath the fear, there was a good man trying to get out. I told them about the tea. I told them that I was willing to bet everything I owned on his rehabilitation. The judge was a stern woman who had seen it all, but she listened. She looked at the restitution check I had submitted. She looked at the psychological evaluation, and she looked at Darius, who was weeping silently at the defense table. She banged her gavel. The sound echoed like a gunshot, but this time it wasn't lethal. She sentenced Darius to 10 years. Darius flinched. The air went out of the room. But then she suspended the sentence. She gave him 2 years of house arrest, 5 years of probation, mandatory gambling addiction counseling. And there was a condition, a very specific condition that Kessler and I had drafted. Darius was released into the custody of his father. He was ordered to live in my house. And he was ordered to maintain full-time employment at Jefferson and Son Garage. If he stepped out of line, if he missed a counseling session, if he so much as looked at a deck of cards, he would serve the full 10 years. Darius looked at me. He couldn't believe it. He was shaking. He mouthed the words, "Thank you," but I didn't smile. I just nodded. This wasn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. This was a work order. I had just bought a broken car, and now I had to rebuild the engine from scratch. We walked out of the courthouse together. The reporters shouted questions, but we ignored them. We got into the Buick. The drive home was quiet. Darius stared out the window at the city he thought he would never see again. When we got to the house, it felt different. The crime scene tape was gone. The blood had been scrubbed from the driveway, but the ghosts were still there. I told Darius to put his things in his old room. I told him that tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. the work began. I told him he wasn't going to be sitting around feeling sorry for himself. He was going to be under the hood of cars, getting grease under his fingernails, learning what it means to earn $1 instead of stealing it. He nodded. He looked grateful. He looked like a man who had been pulled back from the edge of a cliff. But the past has a way of reaching out, even when you think you have closed the door. A week later, I was in the kitchen making breakfast. Darius was already in the garage prepping the tools for the day. I walked out to the mailbox to get the morning post. There were bills, there were flyers, and there was a plain white envelope with no return address. The handwriting was jagged, sharp. I recognized it immediately. It was the same handwriting that had signed the fake mortgage papers. It was the same handwriting that had forged my signature on the insurance policy. I tore it open, standing right there in the driveway. It was a letter from the state penitentiary. I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a long letter. It didn't ask for forgiveness. It didn't ask for money. Dear Dad, I hear Darius is home. I hear you are playing happy family again. You think you won. You think because I am in a cage I can't touch you. But you forgot something, old man. You forgot that I know where the bodies are buried. I know secrets about this family that you haven't even figured out yet. And I have nothing but time. I made friends in here, friends who have friends on the outside. Enjoy your reunion. Enjoy fixing your cars. Because when I get out, or maybe even before then, I am going to finish what I started. I am going to burn that garage to the ground with both of you inside it. Love, Veronica. I stared at the letter. The sun felt cold on my skin. She was locked away, serving 25 years, but her hate was so strong it could travel through walls. She wasn't done. She was just regrouping. I looked toward the garage. I could hear the sound of an impact wrench whirring. Darius was working. He was trying. I crumpled the letter in my fist. I walked back into the house and threw it into the fireplace. I watched it curl and blacken, the words turning to ash. Let her threaten. Let her hate. She didn't understand what she was dealing with. She thought she was fighting a victim and a coward. But she was wrong. She was fighting a father and a son. And now that we were on the same side, there wasn't a fire in hell hot enough to burn us down. I grabbed my coffee mug and walked out to the garage. "Morning, Pop," Darius said, looking up from under the hood of a Chevy. "Morning, son," I said. "Pass me the 3/8 wrench. We have work to do." I didn't tell him about the letter. Not then. He needed to heal. But as I took the wrench, I made a silent promise to the universe. I would keep watch. I would be the wall, and if Veronica ever tried to reach out from the dark again, she would find that the mechanic was ready for her. The letter from Veronica burned in the fireplace, turning to ash, but the smell of her hatred lingered in the house like the scent of rotten meat. I watched the smoke rise up the chimney, and I knew that burning the paper wasn't enough. As long as we stayed in this house, we were living in a museum of our own destruction. Every corner held a memory of a lie. The kitchen where she poisoned my tea. The dining room where she planned my death. The driveway where she bled. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a crime scene, and I was done living in the past. I walked out to the garage where Darius was organizing the socket wrenches. He looked up, wiping grease from his forehead. He looked tired, but it was a good tired, the kind of tired that comes from honest work, not from carrying the weight of a secret. "Pack your tools, son," I said. He froze. "What is wrong? Did something happen?" "No," I said, looking around the garage one last time. "But we are leaving. I am putting the house on the market tomorrow morning." Darius stood up slowly. "But Pop, this is your home. You and Mom built this place." I shook my head. "Your mother is in my heart, Darius. She isn't in these bricks. This house is poisoned. We need a fresh start. A real one." I sold the house in 3 days. I didn't haggle. I didn't care about getting top dollar. I just wanted out. With the money from the sale, plus what was left of my savings after paying the lawyers and the restitution, I had enough to make one last investment. I didn't buy a condo in Florida. I didn't buy a boat. I drove Darius down to the industrial district, past the train tracks, to a cinder block building that used to be a transmission repair shop. It was ugly. The windows were boarded up. The roof leaked. Weeds were growing through the cracks in the pavement. Darius looked at it, confused. "What is this place?" he asked. I pulled a set of keys from my pocket and tossed them to him. He caught them, his eyes wide. "This is our new office," I said. "We spent the next 2 months working harder than we ever had in our lives. We didn't hire contractors. We did it ourselves. We scrubbed the floors until our knees were raw. We painted the walls. We installed the lifts. We slept on cots in the back office because we were too tired to drive to the cheap apartment we were renting." For the first time in his life, Darius didn't complain. He didn't ask for a break. He worked side by side with me, sweating, bleeding, and learning. I watched him transform. The softness that Veronica had exploited was hardening into muscle and resolve. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was my partner. On a Tuesday morning in November, we hung the sign above the bay doors. I had painted it myself. Jefferson and Son, automotive repair. Darius stood in the parking lot looking up at it. I saw his throat work as he swallowed back tears. "And Son," he whispered, "you really put my name on it." After everything I did, I put my hand on his shoulder. "That name is a promise, Darius. It means you are part of the foundation now. Don't let me down." "I won't, Pop," he said. "I swear." Business was slow at first, but word spread. People knew I was back. They knew I was honest. And they saw Darius working the front counter, polite and humble, and they gave him a chance. We were building something real. But Veronica wasn't done. It happened on a rainy Thursday night. We were working late, finishing up a brake job on a customer's Ford. The shop was warm and bright, a sanctuary against the cold rain outside. The radio was playing low. It felt peaceful. Then, the glass of the front office window shattered. The sound was explosive. I dropped my wrench. Darius spun around. Before we could react, a bottle flew through the broken window. It was spinning, a rag stuffed in the neck, lit with a flame. A Molotov cocktail. It hit the floor of the waiting room and exploded. Whoosh! A wave of fire rolled across the linoleum, licking up the walls, catching the old magazines and the cheap sofa we had bought. The alarm started blaring. The sprinkler system hissed but didn't trigger immediately. The pipes were old. "Fire!" Darius screamed. "Pop, fire!" He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall. But I didn't look at the fire. I looked at the window. Through the jagged hole in the glass, I saw a figure standing in the rain. He was wearing a hoodie, his face covered by a mask. He was holding a second bottle. He wasn't a professional hitman. He was a street thug, probably hired by one of Veronica's cellmates' connections. Cheap labor to send a message. He lit the rag. He was going to throw it into the garage bay, right where the gas tanks and the oil drums were. If that bottle landed in here, the whole building would go up like a Roman candle. I didn't think. I moved. I ran toward the bay door. I hit the button to raise it, ducking under it before it was even halfway up. I sprinted out into the rain, a 71-year-old man fueled by pure rage. The thug saw me coming. He panicked. He threw the bottle, but his aim was off. It smashed against the brick wall outside, scorching the masonry but missing the inside. He turned to run. I tackled him. I hit him at the waist, driving my shoulder into his gut. We went down hard onto the wet pavement. My hip screamed in protest, but I didn't let go. He was younger, stronger, and desperate. He punched me in the side of the head. I saw stars. He kicked me in the chest, knocking the wind out of me. He scrambled up, pulling a knife from his belt. "You dead, old man!" he shouted, raising the blade. I tried to get up, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I was on the ground, helpless, watching the steel gleam in the streetlights. Then, a blur of motion slammed into him from the side. It was Darius. He had left the fire. He had come for me. Darius hit the man with the force of a linebacker. He didn't use his fists. He used the heavy iron tire iron he had been holding. He swung it, hitting the man's arm. The knife clattered away. The thug howled and tried to punch Darius, but my son didn't back down. He didn't cower. He drove his knee into the man's stomach and shoved him against the brick wall of the shop. He pinned him there, his forearm pressed against the man's throat. "Stay down!" Darius roared, his face twisted in fury. "Don't you move!" I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the pain in my ribs. I picked up the knife and kicked it away. The thug was struggling, but Darius held him fast. Sirens were wailing in the distance. Someone had called 911. I looked back at the shop. The front office was glowing orange. The fire was spreading. "Darius, hold him!" I shouted. I ran back inside. The heat hit me like a physical blow. The sofa was an inferno. The flames were licking at the doorframe leading to the garage. I grabbed the heavy shop hose. I cranked the valve. I didn't panic. I treated the fire like an engine that was overheating. I attacked the base. I swept the water back and forth, choking the oxygen. Darius dragged the thug into the shop, throwing him onto the floor and zip-tying his hands with a plastic strip from the workbench. Then he grabbed a second extinguisher and joined me. Together we fought the flames. Father and son. We worked in rhythm, moving around each other, shouting commands. "Left side! Got it, Pop! Watch the ceiling!" By the time the fire trucks pulled into the lot, the flames were gone. The office was a blackened, soggy mess. The windows were blown out. Smoke hung thick and heavy in the air. But the garage bay, the heart of the shop, was untouched. The customer's car was safe. The tools were safe. The police took the thug away. He was crying, claiming he was just paid $500 to throw a bottle. He gave up the name of the person who hired him in 5 seconds. It was a known associate of Veronica. She had reached out from behind bars, just like she promised. I stood in the rain, watching the ambulance check Darius for burns. He had some singed hair and a bruise on his cheek, but he was okay. I was bruised and battered, but I was standing. The fire captain walked over to me. "You got lucky, Mr. Jefferson. Another 5 minutes and this whole place would have been a crater. You two did a hell of a job knocking it down." I nodded, wiping soot from my face. "We had practice putting out fires," I said. The trucks left. The police left. It was just me and Darius standing in the ruined front office of our new business. The walls were scorched black. The smell of wet ash was overpowering. The floor was covered in black sludge. The sign out front, Jefferson and Son, was singed on the edge, the paint peeling from the heat. Darius looked around at the destruction. His shoulders slumped. He looked at the water dripping from the ceiling. "We lost it, Pop," he whispered, his voice cracking. "We just built it. We just got started, and she burned it. We lost everything." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had charged a guy with a knife to save his father. I looked at the man who had fought the fire instead of running away. I walked over to the wall where the sign hung. I reached up and wiped a layer of soot off the word "Son." The gold paint underneath was still shining. I turned to Darius. I started to laugh. It was a deep, gravelly laugh that came from my belly. Darius looked at me like I was crazy. "Why are you laughing, Pop? Look at this place. It is a disaster." I shook my head, smiling through the grime on my face. "No, son," I said. "It isn't a disaster. It is a renovation." I kicked a piece of burnt drywall out of the way. "We didn't lose everything, Darius. The structure is solid, the foundation is good, the tools are still there." I pointed to the spot where the thug had tried to kill me. the spot where Darius had saved me. She sent fire to destroy us, I said. But fire cleans things, Darius. It burns away the rot. It burns away the weakness. I put my arm around his shoulder. He flinched, but then he leaned into me. We stood there, two men covered in soot and sweat, standing in the wreckage of a battle we had won. We didn't lose anything tonight, son, I said softly. We just cleared out the last of the trash. Now grab a shovel. We have work to do before we open in the morning. The calendar on the wall of the office says it is October. It has been exactly 1 year since the day I slid under my Buick and found a plastic box that changed the course of my life. Outside the glass window of my office, the autumn sun is slanting through the open bay doors of Jefferson & Son Automotive Repair. The shop is full. Every lift is occupied. The air is thick with the smell of hydraulic fluid, burnt rubber, and the sharp tang of brake cleaner. To most people, that combination smells like labor. To me, it smells like redemption. I took a sip of my coffee and swiveled my chair to look out at the floor. Business is booming. We have a 3-week waiting list for transmission work. People drive in from 3 counties over, not because our prices are the lowest, but because they know that when we fix something, it stays fixed. We built this reputation from the ashes of a fire, quite literally. The scorched walls of the front office are gone, covered by fresh drywall and a coat of bright white paint. The sign out front is new, gleaming in the afternoon light. But the foundation, the concrete slab that survived the flames, is the same. And so is the man working in Bay 2. I watched Darius. He was wrestling with a rusted exhaust manifold on a 10-year-old pickup truck. He wasn't wearing an expensive polo shirt. He was wearing a dark blue mechanic's jumpsuit, stained with grease on the knees and elbows. His hands, once soft and manicured, were rough, scarred, and permanently etched with oil. He had a smudge of dirt across his forehead and sweat dripping down his nose. He looked beautiful. A year ago, Darius would have given up on that manifold. He would have thrown a wrench. He would have called someone else to deal with the problem. Or worse, he would have lied to the customer and said it couldn't be fixed. But today, he just gritted his teeth. He reached for the torch. He heated the bolt, patience in every movement, until he could work it loose. He got it free. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand and grinned. He looked over at the apprentice we had hired last month, a kid from the neighborhood, and explained what he had just done. He was teaching. He was leading. I sat back in my chair, feeling a deep, abiding peace settle in my chest. The probation officer had visited yesterday. He said Darius was a model citizen. His drug tests were clean. His gambling debts were settled. He came to work at 6 a.m. and left at 6 p.m. He went home to a small apartment he paid for with his own paycheck. He saw his son, my grandson Leo, every weekend. We didn't talk much about the past. We didn't talk about the woman sitting in a cell in a maximum security prison 200 miles away. We didn't talk about the hitman or the bomb or the river in Canada. We buried those ghosts under hard work and honest sweat. I opened the top drawer of my desk. It was time. I reached in and pulled out a small, clear evidence bag. The police had returned it to me last week after the final federal sentencing hearing. They asked if I wanted them to destroy it. I told them no. I told them I needed to keep it. I opened the bag and tipped the object into my hand. It was a black plastic box, a GPS tracker, cheap, mass-produced, scratched from where I had pried it off the chassis of my Buick. I held it up to the light. It looked so insignificant, just a piece of circuitry and a battery. But this little box had traveled thousands of miles. It had ridden in a truck to Montreal. It had taken a swim in a frozen river. It had lured a cartel lieutenant onto thin ice, and it had saved my life. But more importantly, it had saved my son. If I hadn't found this tracker, I would have driven to Florida. I would be dead or in prison. Darius would still be married to a monster, drowning in debt, his soul slowly eroding until there was nothing left. This tracker forced the issue. It forced the confrontation. It broke the world so we could put it back together. Darius walked into the office, wiping his hands on a rag. He saw me holding the black box. He froze in the doorway. The smile vanished from his face. He looked at the tracker, and for a second, I saw the shadow of the scared man he used to be flicker in his eyes. "You still have that?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "I just got it back from the evidence locker." Darius walked over and sat on the edge of the desk. He stared at the device. "I hate that thing," he whispered. "Every time I look at it, I remember how weak I was. I remember putting it on your car while you were inside getting me a glass of lemonade. I remember how my hands were shaking. I looked at him. I put the tracker down on the blotter. You shouldn't hate it, Darius. It is part of the story. It is the worst part of the story, Pop. No, I said, leaning forward. It is the turning point. It is the moment the truth started to come out. I picked up the tracker again, feeling its weight. People always say that blood is thicker than water, I said, my voice low. They say family comes first. They say you stick by your kin no matter what. I looked out the window at the busy street, at the life moving by. But they are wrong, son. Sometimes blood gets poisoned. Sometimes the people who share your DNA are the ones holding the knife. And if you have gangrene in your leg, you don't keep it just because it is part of your body. You cut it off. You cut it off so the rest of you can live. Darius looked down at his hands. We cut her off, he said. We did, I agreed. I lost a daughter-in-law. I lost the house your mother and I built. I lost 2 years of my life to stress and fear. I looked him in the eye. But I found you. I found the son I thought I had lost to that woman years ago. I found a partner, and I found a future where I don't have to sleep with one eye open. I stood up. I walked over to the small shadow box frame I had bought earlier that morning. I opened the back and placed the tracker inside, mounting it against the black velvet. I picked up the small brass plaque I had ordered from the trophy shop down the street. I peeled the backing off and stuck it to the bottom of the frame. Darius stood up and looked at it. He read the inscription. One-way ticket to Canada. He let out a short, surprised laugh. It was a genuine laugh, free of bitterness. You are a morbid old man, Pop, he said, shaking his head. I am a realist, I smiled. And I am a mechanic. I believe in keeping the old parts. They remind you of what happens when you don't do the maintenance. I hung the frame on the wall, right next to our business license and the picture of my late wife. It looked out of place, a piece of industrial plastic next to our achievements. But it belonged there. It was the cornerstone. Darius put his hand on my shoulder. His grip was strong, firm. Lunch break, he said. I am buying. There's a taco truck down the street. You are buying? I asked, raising an eyebrow. With what money? With my paycheck, he said proudly. Which I earned. Come on, old man. Let's go before they run out of the spicy salsa. I watched him walk out the door, into the sunlight. He walked with his head high. He walked like a man who owned his mistakes and had paid his debts. I took one last look at the tracker on the wall. The little blue light was dead. The battery was long gone. It wasn't tracking anyone anymore. We were off the grid. We were free. I grabbed my hat and followed my son out the door. The past was in a frame on the wall. The future was waiting for me at a taco truck. And for the first time in a long time, I was hungry. Trust is like a mirror. Once it's broken, you can fix it, but you'll always see the crack in the reflection. I learned that the hardest enemies to fight aren't the ones standing in front of you with a gun, but the ones sleeping under your roof, eating at your table, and calling you family. Blind love isn't love, it's negligence. A parent's job isn't just to provide, but to protect, even if that means protecting your child from their own greed. Check your car, check your circle, and never apologize for seeing the truth. Thank you for listening to my story. If you believe that second chances are earned, not given, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what is the biggest red flag you ever ignored from a family member? I want to hear your truth. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your tools ready.